What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as an UCHIHA and SUKUNA'S Jinchuriki? Part 5. If you enjoy this type of content, please continuously dimension / the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Remember to check out the original story linked in the description. Let's get into the rise of the strongest Uchiha in history without further ado. Hijokyo, the capital of the Land of Fire. This city was far more prosperous than Konoha, filled with gambling houses and brothels. Only by leaving a shinobi village could one truly see how rare shinobi were. Konoha was the center of military power in the Land of Fire, followed distantly by the Fire Temple. The gap between the two was immense. Uchiha Kagami strolled the streets, draped in a loose black robe with Myokyo at his waist. He wore no forehead protector, and his attire bore no clan crest. He looked every bit like a wandering swordsman. In Kagami's eyes, this so-called bustling Hijokyo was nothing special. Perhaps decades into the future, it might hold more appeal. For now, it was just a fleeting novelty. He rarely sought entertainment, partly because he didn't enjoy it and partly because this era offered little worth exploring. Seeing these people reminds me of the Heian period. Sukuna mused within the seal of the dragon vein, his fingers stroking his chin as though lost in nostalgia. The sealed space, now illuminated by the dragon vein's energy, was far brighter than before. Sukuna sat atop a massive ox skull, his feet immersed in a crimson pool. That was an interesting time, Sukuna continued. So many delicious morsels to savor. Kagami chuckled, his voice laced with sarcasm. Finally willing to talk again? I thought the great king of curses had decided to sulk himself to death. Didn't expect you to throw a tantrum like a spoiled child. Ever since their last confrontation, Sukuna had been eerily silent, even during his brief, free time. Kagami had almost assumed the ancient curse was wallowing in defeat. Shut up, Uchiha Kagami, Sukuna growled, his tone venomous. I know you won't release me, nor will you trust anything I say. I've come to terms with that. Pausing, he sneered. But could you, for once, speak like a normal person? Has no one ever told you how insufferable you are? Kagami smirked. Apologies. Force of habit. Not planning to change it, though. He glanced at a woman staggering toward him. Her appearance screamed of her trade, a courtesan looking for business. Young man, care for some fun, she purred, swaying slightly as she approached. Kagami smiled politely, shaking his head. No money. You're so handsome, I won't charge you. Thanks for the compliment. But I'm busy, he replied, quickening his pace. Sukuna snorted. Pathetic creatures like her. Slay them, and you'd save yourself the trouble. You wield such immense power, yet you waste it. Didn't bother learning from your time in that high schooler's body, did you? Kagami quipped. Not every problem needs a blade. Why kill her? To silence a patrol and then massacre your way to the daimyo's palace? How tedious. He sighed. I've told you before, I despise meaningless slaughter. You're lecturing me now? Sukuna's laughter was sharp and bitter. That's rich coming from you. You even have the gall to comment on my faces. The daimyo's castle. Tobarama Dano, is it truly you? The daimyo of the Land of Fire, Enshi Munfusa, was an elderly man with sagging skin, pale complexion, and sunken eyes, clearly unwell. During Tobarama's tenure as Hokage, Enshi had only recently ascended to his position. They had interacted several times, and Tobarama's wisdom and decisiveness had left a deep impression on the daimyo. Back then, Konoha never needed to send emissaries to request funds. Every quarter, the daimyo would personally send resources to the village. Now, looking at the aged man before him, Tobarama was acutely aware of the passage of time. He wasted no time with pleasantries. Munfusa, you're aware of the recent events in Konoha? You don't need to know how I've returned. What I want to hear is your opinion on what's transpired. If Kagami's coup had merely been a bid for power, Tobarama might have dismissed it as another political upheaval. But Kagami's actions were far more severe. He hadn't just seized control, he had decimated Konoha's clans, many of which had ties to the Senju. Entire families had been annihilated. Even more disturbing, Kagami had installed Minato as a figurehead while placing the Uchiha above the village. This went against everything Tobirama had fought for, merging clan and village identities into one cohesive entity. For that reason, Tobirama's hatred for Kagami burned deeply. The daimyo sighed heavily, producing a letter. First, Hokage-sama and my father envisioned the one nation one village system as a partnership. I have always adhered to that ideal. But Kagami, his words reduced the daimyo to a mere subordinate. It's outrageous. Tobirama Dano, with you here, I implore you to. Suddenly, Tobirama's expression darkened, his sharp senses catching something alarming. He's here, he said grimly. Kagami has arrived. Grant him whatever he demands. Minfusa. Don't get yourself killed. With that, Tobirama vanished. Outside the daimyo's castle, a trail of corpses littered the stone-paved path, their blood pooling in the cracks. Kagami strolled past the carnage, his expression indifferent. The last surviving bodyguard trembled violently, his voice breaking as he shouted, We were only doing our duty, protecting the daimyo. You. His voice cracked into a desperate scream. Why? Why must someone as powerful as you slaughter us all? Without breaking stride, Kagami replied coolly, his voice devoid of emotion. What are you talking about? The strong killing the weak. Isn't that the natural order of things? As he walked away, the guard's body collapsed into a pile of shredded flesh. The guardians of the daimyo, the elite protectors, were considered the highest military power within the daimyo's castle. Yet, even they could not stop that man. The rest of the garrison, armed with spears, didn't dare step forward. They might as well have been forming an honor guard. The attendants opened the grand doors. Enshi Minfusa, the daimyo of the Land of Fire, fanned himself in an attempt to mask his unease. Uchiha Kagami-sama, I apologize for the lack of a proper welcome, Minfusa greeted, his voice trembling slightly. Kagami's sharp eyes narrowed as he sniffed the air. The scent of the dead. He nodded slightly. A pleasure to meet you, Daimyo Dano. I have an announcement to make. Please summon your sons and ministers. Minfusa's face darkened. This man. Does he intend to depose me simply because I didn't respond to his letters? Recalling Tobirama's earlier warning, Minfusa sighed in resignation. Understood. Someone, bring a seat for Uchiha-sama. The two sat across from each other, awaiting the arrival of the ministers and the daimyo's heirs. Unable to bear the oppressive silence, Minfusa broke the ice. Kagami Dano, what is it that you wish to achieve here? Taking a sip of tea, Kagami replied nonchalantly, You're disobedient. I plan to replace you with someone who will listen. His casual tone made it sound as though he were discussing changing a leash on a pet. Minfusa clenched his fists, barely containing his anger. Kagami Dano, replacing a daimyo is an extraordinarily complex matter. Given Konoha's current state, I am willing to fully support your reconstruction efforts. Silence, Kagami interrupted, his gaze piercing. Did Tobirama teach you that line? Minfusa's face paled, his hand trembling as his fan clattered to the floor. Tobirama-sama has been gone for years. Surely you jest, Kagami Dano. Kagami ignored him, his attention shifting to the doorway as the daimyo's sons filed in. The eldest appeared to be in his 30s, the youngest just a teenager. Some wore expressions of suppressed excitement, as though they understood what was about to happen. As time passed, the ministers governing Haijokyo arrived. The Grand Minister, the ministers of the left and right, and others, most inherited their positions through family lines. The political structure of the shinobi world mirrored its social stagnation. The daimyo's son became the daimyo, the Hokage's son became the Hokage, and the scapegoat's son became the next scapegoat. Entrenched traditions, difficult to dismantle. Uchiha Kagami. Sukuna's voice echoed within his mind. You must find this all so tiresome. These worthless fools dare to think themselves above you. You could slaughter their guards and be worshipped as a god. Isn't that how monarchies like this operate? Kagami remained silent, paying no attention to Sukuna's musings. The ministers of Haijokyo are all present, Minfusa finally announced, his tone curt. Minfusa no longer feigned courtesy. He knew his position was about to be stripped, but that didn't matter. With his sons in line, he could wield power from the shadows once Kagami was gone. The ministers, visibly nervous, sat in a circle. The daimyo sat in the center, with his sons whispering among themselves. Kagami scanned the room, his expression unreadable. "You all understand the situation, so I'll spare you introductions," he began. "Konoha, as the protector of the Land of Fire, has suffered greatly. Despite the Third Great Ninja War, funds for the village have been withheld. This is unacceptable." The Minister of Finance, already briefed on the situation, reluctantly stood. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Kagami-sama, earlier this year, we allocated 9 billion ryo to Konoha. An additional 3 billion in supplies followed. We have nothing left to give. However," he added hastily, "since you've come personally, we'll do what we can. Even if it means tightening our belts, we'll provide 5 billion ryo to aid reconstruction." Kagami listened silently, showing no reaction. Then, "Frankly, this is an internal Konoha matter," said a square-faced man standing abruptly. His imposing figure and stern demeanor marked him as the Minister of War, responsible for the Land of Fire's militia. "It's unreasonable to expect us to fund your civil war." The room fell deathly silent. All eyes turned to Kagami, awaiting his response. "You have guts." "I respect that," Kagami said softly, drumming his fingers on the table. Swish. In an instant, UCHIHA Genka and UCHIHA And materialized at his side, their Sharingan glowing ominously. Before anyone could process what had happened, Genka's blade flashed. Thud. The Minister of War's severed head hit the floor, rolling to a stop. The silence that followed was deafening. Kagami stood, his tone eerily calm. "But I don't need fools like you." He gestured toward the Minister of Finance. "You'll take his place as daimyo. Ensure the accounts are accurate. All funds flow to Konoha. And me." The scrawny, goat-bearded minister stammered, pointing at himself in disbelief. Munfusa slammed the table, his composure snapping. "Kagami, this is outrageous," he roared. "The daimyo is descended from the gods, a divine lineage spanning millennia. How dare you defy the will of the heavens? Do you not fear the wrath of the entire shinobi world?" Kagami didn't even spare him a glance. "Divine lineage," he sneered. "True divine bloodlines wield powers passed through generations. Yours is just a fairy tale." With that, Kagami raised a hand. UCHIHA Genka stepped forward, followed by a dozen other UCHIHA, blades drawn. "You know what to do, Genka." "Yes, Kagami-sama," Genka replied, his voice steady. Kagami walked out of the castle, indifferent to the cries and screams behind him. To him, the daimyo was nothing more than a ceremonial figurehead, easily replaceable. Any commoner could sit on that throne, and likely perform better. As he strolled through the streets, night began to fall. Lanterns illuminated the bustling crowds. The courtesan from earlier spotted him and lit up with recognition. "Young man, you finished your business," she called out. "Care to join me for a drink?" Kagami reached into his sleeve, pulling out a few silver ryo. Taking her hand, he placed the coins in her palm. His warm smile left her momentarily speechless. "You're very beautiful, but I'm not old enough to drink yet," he said gently. "Maybe next time. Goodbye." By the time she regained her composure, the young man was already gone. Konohagakure. Kagami Uchiha consciously avoided the Konoha cemetery and the Uchiha clan grounds, heading instead toward the Naka shrine. Activating his Sharingan, Kagami deciphered the ancient inscriptions on the six-path stone tablet with ease. The text recounted a tale of a divine being seeking balance by dividing yin and yang into two poles, the interplay of which birthed all creation, Senriganban. And then came the final inscription, Infinite Tsukuyami, the ultimate technique of the Uchiha clan, one that promised eternal peace for the ninja world. The original unaltered content of the tablet was now unknowable, but Kagami speculated that it might have included prophecies from the great Toad Sage. From a historical standpoint, the Toads of Mount Mayaboku represented the indigenous powers of the ninja world. Chakra, in contrast, was an alien import. Placing his hand on the stone tablet, Kagami summoned his black and red Susanoo energy blade and brought it down in a ferocious strike. Clang! The blade halted against the stone's surface. The tablet was completely unharmed. Kagami frowned slightly. The strength required was still beyond him. To Madara Uchiha, yin-yang unification was the key to unlocking the mysteries of Senriganban and achieving the Rinnegan. Madara had assumed Kagami might eventually awaken the Rinnegan. But Kagami understood that such a transformation was impossible. The Rinnegan's creation was not merely a result of yin-yang balance. It required the chakra of both Indra and Asura. Only through their combined essence could the six-path sage's power re-emerge, triggering a reversion to the ancestral state of the Rinnegan. It was more than elemental unification. It was the unique inheritance of the sage. Kekei Sozo, a level beyond bloodline elimination, requiring the synthesis of 7 chakra natures. Inside Kagami's mind, Sukuna examined the stone tablet through Kagami's eyes, his tone uncharacteristically somber. Kagami, you really are descendants of gods. This infinite Tsukuyami, it's essentially a jutsu to massacre the entire world in one stroke. No wonder you're so insane. Your ancestors were clearly unhinged too. Kagami withdrew his hand and spoke lightly. Infinite Tsukuyami. It sounds so idyllic. A world without lies or regret. If given the choice, many would willingly enter such a world. What difference would it make, living in an illusion they couldn't distinguish from reality? Oi brat, you're not seriously considering this, are you? That'd be boring as hell. Kagami chuckled softly and shook his head. My mind isn't built for such thoughts. That's not why I came here. Crack. Manifesting the black-red Susanoo once more, Kagami summoned a massive chakra hand that gripped the six-path stone tablet. The ground trembled violently as the hand exerted force. Slowly but surely, the tablet emerged from the earth. It was far longer than it appeared above ground, extending over 10 meters in length. Despite Kagami's formidable Mangekyo techniques, the stone tablet remained impervious, a creation on par with Kekei Sozo. Even Black Zetsu had only been able to alter its inscriptions using energy of a similar caliber. To Kagami, this was the true artifact of the Uchiha clan, not the so-called God Tree Branch flame fan. With a resounding crash, the tablet landed in Kagami's mental space, right in front of Sukuna's sealed gate. Sukuna frowned, visibly uncomfortable. Between the glowing purple dragon vein above and the ominous tablet now occupying the space, he felt distinctly out of place. Your mental space is starting to look like a graveyard. Doesn't it bother you? Not at all. It's not like I spend all day staring at it. Seated atop the stone tablet, Kagami gazed at Sukuna behind the seal. You've been slacking off, haven't you? The rate at which cursed energy converts to spiritual energy has slowed significantly. As Kagami's growth system, Sukuna had always been a reliable source of spiritual energy. After mastering the yin-yang conversion, Kagami's spiritual energy no longer overflowed but was instead seamlessly converted into physical energy, continuously increasing his chakra reserves. Initially, Kagami's physical energy had been a tiny fraction of his spiritual energy, like half a meter compared to 50 meters. Over time, his physical energy had grown to 3 meters. However, instead of maintaining a steady 50 meters of spiritual energy, it had now dropped to 49. Kagami suspected Sukuna of slacking. Sukuna rested his head on his hands, sneering. You never asked, so I didn't tell you. Ever since you took the dragon vein, the growth stopped. Those loose strands of fear and hatred that once roamed the world? They found new hosts. Last time I took control, I sensed the birth of several creatures similar to me. Perhaps their seals were broken. Who knows? This world might soon be like the Heian era, teeming with monsters. Kagami mulled over Sukuna's words. He had indeed noticed a shift during their last battle, but had been too focused on unlocking his Mangekyo to investigate further. The ninja world had its fair share of malevolent entities, both naturally occurring and artificially created. Morio, the Box of Ultimate Bliss, Zero Tails, the Jashin cult's deity, and so on. The Uzumaki clan was said to have sealed numerous such evils. Was this a ripple effect of taking the dragon vein? Sukuna approached the seal, grinning wickedly. Interesting, isn't it? To grow stronger, you'll have to empower me. You keep saying we're not the same, Kagami. But our fates are intertwined. Imagine the power we could unleash if we acted as one. Forget cutting stone, together, we could slice through worlds. Ignoring Sukuna's ominous sales pitch, Kagami asked, could you replicate that spatial slash you used before? That wasn't a simple slash, Sukuna corrected sharply. It was a full incantation, a kai, a severance of the world itself. And no, it's not just a spatial slash. Fine, we'll call it a spatial slash, Kagami said flatly. Can you still perform it? No. Sukuna scowled. But if you let me out, I'll show you. Got it. So you can't. Sukuna's face twisted in frustration. Kagami muttered to himself. The principle must involve targeting the world itself, with collateral damage as a side effect. In a realm as stable as this one, replicating such a feat would be challenging. Let me out, and I'll show you what's possible, Sukuna deadpanned. With a soft tap, Kagami jumped off the tablet. Maybe next time. As Kagami's spirit began to fade from the mental space, Sukuna called out, Aren't you curious about the other monsters I sensed? Slay them, and we'll both grow stronger. Kagami's voice echoed faintly as he disappeared. Patience. Don't tell me how to do my job. You so-called villains are always in such a rush. You'd be dead if it weren't for me. Sit tight and reflect for a while. As the black curtain of the seal fell, Sukuna didn't scream or rage this time. Instead, he glanced up at the writhing dragon vein overhead. Though his host was insufferable, Sukuna found some solace in watching the restless energy flow. It was, at least, mildly entertaining. Year 49 of Konoha. The Third Shinobi World War had not ended. Even the Wind Country unilaterally tore up the peace treaty and dispatched a group of elite shinobi to the Land of Lightning. The establishment of the Four Nations Alliance had initially faced some obstacles. However, when news spread that the entire Fire Country daimyo clan had been annihilated, the daimyos of the four great nations became the most anxious of all. They relocated themselves to the Land of Lightning, which became the Alliance's base of operations. The Land of Lightning was chosen for its geographical advantage. Surrounded by sea on three sides with only a small land connection to the Land of Hot Water, it was easy to defend and difficult to invade. The four great nations were amassing their military forces, but due to the fear instilled by Uchiha Kagami's power, they did not dare to take the initiative to attack. Instead, they worked together in secret, scheming something. The Fire Country, meanwhile, was the most devastated in this war. It had fought against the Wind, Earth, and Lightning nations, then against the Mist and Earth nations, and finally waged an internal conflict against itself. Now, it needed to recover and rebuild. This was not a war of all-out conflict, but rather a state of Cold War, a tense standoff. The Land of Rain. The ninja world had lost its shadow in the dark, Danzo. Yet, some events seemed destined to occur. During the Second Shinobi World War, many notable figures emerged, including a man regarded as the pinnacle of the shinobi world, Hanzo of the Salamander. He had struck fear into the samurai of the Land of Iron and single-handedly led the Land of Rain in resisting the three major nations. A man's end is not in death, but when he loses his conviction. These were Hanzo's words. Yet, even he had not escaped the cloud of senility in his later years. Hanzo had been the savior of the Land of Rain, a hero to his people. Because of him, the three major nations had diverted their battlegrounds away from the Land of Rain. However, this redirection brought the war to the Land of Grass. Although some small-scale skirmishes continued in the Rain Country, it was much better than before. Against this backdrop, Hanzo became a symbol of faith for the Rain Country's people. This was especially true for Yahiko, who idolized Hanzo and viewed him as a model to follow. Yahiko dreamed of creating a land of rain that no longer shed tears. When Hanzo invited Akatsuki to discuss the future of the Rain Country, Yahiko had eagerly agreed, leading his comrades with boundless enthusiasm. As Yahiko's group departed into the rain, Obito and Zetsu revealed themselves. "Is everything in place?" Obito asked, his face obscured by his mask. Though his identity had already been exposed, the mask provided a sense of distance, a fragile comfort from the cruel world. The famed Hanzo was surprisingly easy to deceive, Zetsu replied with a sinister chuckle. "I simply told him that Akatsuki posed a threat to his rule, and he took the bait. That old man's resolve has weakened. He no longer deserves the title of half-god," Zetsu added with a sneer. "If anyone deserves that title now, it's probably Kagami." Obito's eye narrowed. Don't compare someone like him to Uchiha Kagami. The more Obito grew, the more he understood Kagami's actions. They had grown up in the same district, only a short distance apart. When Obito was very young, he would eagerly seek out Kagami to play, but Kagami was always training. Even at that age, Kagami was distant, untouchable. He was perpetually pushing himself, as if racing against an invisible clock. Back then, Obito had not understood why. But after Rin's death, and after witnessing Kagami's restoration of the Uchiha clan, he finally realized the truth. Kagami had always known. He had known the cruelty of the world from a very young age. Should we tell Kagami about the Moon's Eye plan? Zetsu asked. Obito shook his head. Kagami would never join us. Besides, he's already protected what he holds dear. He doesn't need the Moon's Eye. Zetsu chuckled, a dangerous glint in his eyes. Perhaps we could change that. Losing loved ones tends to open one's eyes to reality. At the meeting point between Akatsuki and Hanzo, the situation had escalated. Konan was taken hostage. Originally, the plan was to capture Yahiko and kill him outright, but Hanzo had come up with a better idea. Kill Yahiko, and I will release this woman, Hanzo demanded, his voice cold. Nagato trembled, clutching a kunai. His Rinnegan trembled with suppressed emotion, a storm brewing in his heart. Yahiko made the decision for him. You are the savior of this world, Yahiko said, smiling faintly as he impaled himself on Nagato's kunai. I believe in you. Life faded from Yahiko's eyes, and Nagato's Rinnegan trembled more violently than ever. From a distance, Obito and Zetsu watched the scene unfold. This should do it, Zetsu said, his voice thick with satisfaction. Nagato will now see the harsh reality of this world. But then, something changed. A loud summoning reverberated across the battlefield. A colossal figure emerged, a monstrous, emaciated humanoid form with 9 eyes and a grotesque appearance. The Gedo statue had been summoned. Obito and Zetsu froze in place. Their expressions twisted into shock as they exchanged a look. This is bad. Zetsu exclaimed. Madara. Obito growled. Obito and Zetsu hurried to the edge of the battlefield, but they didn't find any trace of Madara. It seemed he hadn't been summoned alongside the Gedo statue. That meant they were out of time. Neither of them had expected Nagato to summon the Gedo statue so quickly. The Rinnegan wasn't like the Sharingan. How could losing a close friend accelerate its development? Black Zetsu mentally took notes. If this generation's Rinnegan failed to revive his mother, this data could prove useful in the future. We need to head back. Madara still had unfinished business. Dying unexpectedly would ruin everything. In an unknown underground cavern. By the time Obito and Zetsu returned, the summoning of the Gedo statue had ended. The statue's tendrils were once again connected to Madara, but it was clear his aura had grown even weaker. It seems you succeeded, Madara said flatly, his tone devoid of emotion. I thought I had more time to guide you, but it looks like I have only a month or 2 left. Obito, the things I don't have time to teach you, I will implant into your mind using transcription seal. Let's begin. Elsewhere, in a very different underground hideout, Orochimaru and Tobirama exited the laboratory, peeling off blood-stained gloves. The dark, foreboding atmosphere made them seem like 2 sinister scientists. Although they couldn't rely on the daimyo of the Fire Country for funding anymore, Tobirama had no trouble securing resources. With his capabilities, acquiring money and equipment was hardly a challenge. Why not just steal the equipment? Even someone like Uchiha Kagami resorted to fundraising to purchase medical devices. If scientists were regularly robbed, who would bother to develop or produce technology? Equipment needed maintenance and upgrades, after all. Robbing money or manpower was one thing, but research and innovation deserved respect. We finally found a suitable direction for improvement. Orochimaru leaned back on the sofa, picking up a still warm boiled egg from the table. He despised cold food. Tobirama, who had no need for sustenance and lacked taste buds, frowned as he looked at Orochimaru. I heard something disturbing on my last trip out, Tobirama began. Is it true that boy Kagami is Madara's reincarnation? Orochimaru chuckled lightly. It's one thing for others to believe such rumors, but you, Tobirama-sama? You who invented Edo Tensei, surely you know reincarnation doesn't work that way. Tobirama shook his head. Just because it doesn't work for most people doesn't mean it's impossible for Madara. That boy's personality is different from Madara's, Tobirama admitted. He's more ruthless, but also more devoted to the Uchiha clan. In fact, he reminds me. Tobirama trailed off, unwilling to voice the thought. Combining everything he knew about Kagami, the boy seemed like a blend of himself and Izuna. After some thought, Tobirama stood up. There's only one way to find out. You're planning to summon Madara with Edo Tensei? Tobirama nodded. Previously, I lacked the control over the technique to dare such a summoning. But with its current completion, as long as we prepare even the minimum sacrifices, we should be able to control him. How bold, Orochimaru said, his eyes glinting with an unsettling light. He grinned. Do you have Madara's DNA? I have plenty. His entire body was buried by me. Tobirama didn't make Orochimaru wait long. With his flying Raijin technique, he quickly returned. However, his expression was grim, reminiscent of when he'd returned from inspecting Konoha's reconstruction 2 years ago. His body, it's gone. Orochimaru's pupils contracted. Who could have taken it? Tobirama shook his head. Impossible. I placed numerous seals. Not even my brother could have taken it without leaving traces. He retrieved a strand of Madara's hair. I have a bad feeling about this. Let's test this first. Orochimaru found himself feeling rather saintly in comparison to Tobirama. The Edo Tensei ritual began quickly, with a recently captured rogue shinobi as the sacrifice. Tobirama maintained a shred of dignity. Their sacrifices were criminals from the black market, ones who had slaughtered innocent villagers. As the living sacrifice was consumed by the ritual, Tobirama and Orochimaru readied control seals, their nerves taut. But, after a gut-wrenching scream, the sacrifice fell lifeless to the ground, and nothing happened. Madara's soul was not in the Pure Land. There are two possibilities, Tobirama said darkly. First, that boy really does house Madara's soul. Second, Madara isn't dead. Orochimaru fell silent for a moment before speaking. The second option. Kagami can't be anyone's reincarnation or vessel. He is unique. Perfect. Tobirama stared deeply at Orochimaru. After 2 years of working together, he trusted the man's judgment. Orochimaru had seen Kagami up close, if even he said so. Tobirama clenched his fists, frustration evident. We've all been deceived by Madara. He never died. He's in hiding, planning something terrible. Orochimaru frowned. But if Madara never died, then during the period after Hashirama's death, who stopped him from acting? Who knows? Perhaps he was gravely injured and couldn't move freely. Tobirama sighed. The more the Sharingan develops, the more extreme the Uchiha's emotions become. That's why I've always been wary of them. Ordinary emotional outbursts are fleeting, but when the Uchiha succumb to their emotions, it becomes permanent. Just like Madara. Even if there was a brief reconciliation, in the end, he still. Orochimaru chuckled. I won't comment on past grievances between the founders. Let's focus on what's next. What should we do now? Tobirama pondered for a moment. Continue refining Edo Tensei. We need Hashirama to return at his peak strength. Neither Kagami nor the lurking Madara are opponents we can handle as we are. A month passed. At the Konoha cemetery, Kagami crouched before a gravestone, replacing the flowers in a vase. 10 days ago, his grandmother had passed away. She had never known what had happened in Konoha. During the Great Battle, Kagami had arranged for her and Shursui to travel. She died peacefully, surrounded by a comforting lie, that Konoha was finally at peace. That Kagami and the Uchiha were now in harmony with the village. Footsteps approached behind him, but Kagami didn't turn. Rikufu, it's her. She was a lovely girl, came Madara's voice. He stepped up beside Kagami, gazing at the two names engraved on the stone, Uchiha Rikufu and Uchiha Kagami. You've lived up to the name, though I doubt he would have approved of what you've done. Kagami smirked faintly. Is this goodbye, Madara-sama? Madara glanced toward the Founder's Rock, his lips curving into a faint smile. Just a trip to the Pure Land. I'll be back, Kagami. I'll be waiting. Grow as much as you can. I look forward to the day we fight again, at our full strength. Your stance is unsteady, and your mind is too distracted. When you hesitate to strike a vital point, do you think you can harm me? Stop overthinking. In battle, your only concern should be how to kill the enemy as quickly as possible. In the Uchiha clan district, the sound of clashing blades rang out in the training ground. Shursui collapsed to the ground after his short sword was knocked away. Huff. I can't go on, brother. Let's take a break. Year 50 of Konoha's founding. The Cold War had dragged on for 3 years. Within the Land of Fire, bandits, dangerous beasts, and evil spirits had been eradicated by Konoha's ninja. Underground black markets were also thoroughly purged. Only in a stable environment could the economy flourish. Many lives had been lost from Kagami's generation and the one before it, leaving the village with a dwindling population. Over the past few years, Kagami had actively encouraged intermarriage between Uchiha and outsiders. Unlike the policies of the Senju, however, there was a crucial difference. No matter the spouse's origins or the child's innate talent, all offspring were considered Uchiha. Divorce was not an option, only death could sever the union. In these few years, even Konoha's civilian ninja began to realize that perhaps Uchiha leadership was the correct path forward. Although many had initially viewed Minato as a puppet Hokage, it became clear he had authority over all Uchiha members, except Kagami. The Uchiha respected him without complaint. After all, Minato was undoubtedly stronger than most of them. Issuing orders was only natural. Though the Uchiha remained difficult to approach, they never exploited others. Mission rewards were distributed fairly, without greed or favoritism. Even secret techniques previously hoarded by ninja clans were made available as mission rewards. The only exceptions were techniques requiring Byakugan or other specific bloodline abilities, which had no reason to be shared. Breaking the monopoly on secret techniques achieved what even Hashirama couldn't. As for the Uchiha, aside from their Sharingan-exclusive techniques, most of their fire-style ninjutsu had already been shared during the village's founding. While they held an elevated status, they never used their position to oppress others. Such behavior would tarnish the clan's honor. Even the previously hostile Hyuga clan was no longer a point of contention. Previously, the two clans had vied for dominance as the premier dojutsu family. Now the results were clear. The Sharingan was superior to the Byakugan. Why waste time squabbling with weaker opponents? At its core, the Uchiha adhered to one principle: the capable should lead. In the past, dissatisfaction stemmed from their accomplishments going unrecognized. Now, positions were earned solely through merit. If someone couldn't rise, it was their own shortcoming. Complaining was futile. Minato had even implemented Kagami's offhand suggestion of a dual leader system. Previously, the strict separation of light and shadow had been a mistake. Today's Konoha was more than a ninja village. It was the true economic, political, and military center of the Land of Fire. As Hokage, Minato managed interactions with officials, diplomatic affairs, and external military operations. A newly established role, Shadow Leader, managed internal security within the Land of Fire. The first Shadow Leader was none other than Tsukumo Hatake. This wasn't a permanent position. Should no suitable successor arise, the Hokage had the authority to dissolve it. After all, the role carried significant power. Tsukumo was trustworthy, but the same couldn't be guaranteed for future candidates. Under Minato's leadership, the Land of Fire had stabilized in just 3 years. The country was steadily recovering from the war's aftermath. Minato felt fortunate that Kagami wasn't a warmonger. If he had chosen to launch an offensive against the Four Nations Alliance, Konoha might have emerged victorious, but it would lack the manpower to manage the aftermath. Victory would be meaningless if there were no one left to govern. Minato believed in focusing on population growth. With Kagami's presence, they could build a generation capable of governing the unified shinobi world in 10 to 20 years. Minato wasn't a conservative. He didn't shy away from the casualties of unification. He understood that only by imposing order on this fractured world could there be lasting peace. That was why he had chosen to stand beside Kagami. Meanwhile, in the rest of the shinobi world, the Land of Fire's progress contrasted starkly with the suffering of other nations. With most ninja forces stationed in the Land of Lightning, vast territories were left unguarded. Bandits, monsters, and chaos ran rampant. A year ago, the hidden grass village's Hozuki Castle, which held countless rogue ninja, experienced a massive uprising. Many prisoners escaped. Where could these rogue ninjas go? They dared not venture into the heavily guarded Land of Fire or Land of Lightning. Instead, they wreaked havoc in smaller, weaker nations. Entire countries were swallowed by chaos. Even the sand and stone villages struggled to maintain order. Protecting their villages was challenging enough. Despite the turmoil, the daimyo and kage of the 4 allied nations refused to leave the Land of Lightning. They knew that standing together was their only hope. Separating meant certain death. Kagami was not an enemy who could be overwhelmed by numbers. Hashirama and Madara had already proven that. Their only hope lay in developing a weapon capable of opposing him. Kagami nudged Shisui with his foot. "Get up. Your 3-minute break is over. 2 more minutes. Please, just 2 more minutes." Gasping for breath, Shisui begged. Before Kagami could respond, Yunma appeared at the edge of the training ground. Glancing at Shisui, Yunma said, "2 more minutes. After that, you'd better practice diligently. Slack off, and I'll beat you to death." All right, I got it." Kagami walked over to Yunma. "What is it?" Yunma lowered his voice. "The matter you instructed. Uchiha Mikoto has given birth to her second child. It's a boy. Have they named him?" "Not yet. Call him Sasuke," Kagami said, a rare smile gracing his lips. "Once he's weaned, bring him to me." Mikoto's family, including Itachi, were not permitted to leave the Uchiha compound. Fugaku rarely left his home. Without his eyes, the former clan leader had no reason to show his face in public. While Kagami had spared Fugaku from any formal punishment, the implications were clear. Yunma, part of Kagami's personal guard, knew his leader's temperament well. Though Kagami was strict, he was not unreasonable. A slip of the tongue wouldn't cost someone their life. Lord Kagami. Fugaku deserves his fate, but this newborn child. "Yunma, what are you thinking?" Kagami chuckled softly. "This child is the one I've anticipated most. He will be my successor. You are invincible, my lord." Having witnessed Kagami's journey firsthand, Yunma spoke with unwavering conviction. "Of course, I won't fail." Kagami's tone was calm, as though stating an undeniable truth. His confidence was infectious. "Don't misunderstand. Naming a successor doesn't mean I'll die anytime soon. For now, your duty is to protect that child." "Yes, my lord." Night fell. In Uchiha Kagami's residence, Tsukumo Hatake entered alone. After a polite greeting, he took a seat opposite Kagami. "You came in person, Tsukumo." Tsukumo took out a sealing scroll from his pouch and said, "This time, the entity was too strong. I didn't feel comfortable letting anyone else deliver it." The Forgers of Tenkai revived their ancestral founder, Saimai. With the chaos outside the Land of Fire, his strength grew rapidly. Remembering something, a rare smile appeared on Tsukumo's serious face. Not long after his revival, Saimai declared war on the 5 great nations and challenged the strongest ninja of the current era. Kagami took the scroll, unrolled it, and released the seal. A bluish, ethereal form began to materialize, letting out an enraged roar. "Fools! I am Saimai, the founder of Tenkai. How dare you seal me?" Crunch. As if some invisible beast had devoured it, Saimai's upper body disappeared entirely. Another snap, and the entire spectral form was gone. Tsukumo had seen this scene before. This sight reminded him too much of a lackey offering sacrifices to some great demon lord. The Land of Fire had once been teeming with such malevolent entities, but they had largely been eradicated over the past few years. Now, Kagami's forces extended their reach beyond the Land of Fire, focusing on hunting these creatures while leaving bandits and rogue ninja alone. "Are you sure this won't affect your body?" Tsukumo asked with concern. The entities they captured were bizarre, feeding on human malice. Without any ominous gestures or sinister smirks, Kagami simply sipped his tea. A drop of ink contained a cup of water, but it's nothing in a river. "Any updates on the secret investigation?" Tsukumo shook his head. "We haven't found the person you described, this Jigen. Keep it confidential. Only involve those we can trust. If you find any trace of him, don't act on your own. I'll handle it personally." "Understood. There's one more thing." Tsukumo's tone grew peculiar. "We haven't encountered Orochimaru, but we did come across Tobirama Senju." Kagami chuckled. "How strong is he?" "We didn't fight. The moment he saw us, he used Flying Thunder God to escape." Kagami lightly tapped the table. "I suppose you haven't found Obito either." Tsukumo sighed. "Kakashi has been searching for him for 3 years. Not a single trace." Kagami fell into thought. The shinobi world still harbored many threats, yet it was unnervingly quiet. The so-called 4 Nations alliance was hardly a concern. The real problems were Jigen and the Otsutsuki Ishiki inside him, the Black Zetsu faction, and the Tobirama Orochimaru duo. But they remained hidden, as if waiting for Kagami to die before taking action. Smiling faintly, Kagami thought, fine, let's see who outlasts whom. If they never revealed themselves, he would exhaust all resources, even taking the fight to the moon. By then, no one could create chaos. Kagami operated with patience and precision. He wasn't chasing power for its own sake. He sought perfection, a path to suppress the Mangekyo Sharingan's limitations. Hayashi Hyuga works under you, correct? Kagami asked. Yes, he's the captain of the second unit. Recall him. Have him secretly monitor Hinata Hyuga's mother. Once her child is born, assign guards for round-the-clock surveillance. I'll arrange for someone to coordinate with him. Though the command seemed odd, Tsukumo didn't question Kagami. Over the years, Kagami's actions had solidified his image as a righteous leader. Understood. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave. You should rest early, Kagami. All right. As Tsukumo departed, Kagami gazed out at the moon, deep in thought. He had dispatched people to search for a pathway between the Earth and the moon. Once found, he would storm the moon and seize the Tensigen. He also considered the Otsutsuki clan. Should Hamura Otsutsuki's descendant descend to Earth, Kagami would ensure their demise. Initially, he spared Hayashi because of Hinata. She was bait for the Otsutsuki. Still, with the Hyuga clan no longer divided into branch and main families, there were no caged bird seals on the next generation. Would there be a purer Byakugan than Hinata's? Perhaps Niji? Kagami recalled the historical encounter. The Otsutsuki descended not to steal Byakugan, but to find a bride for Tonari. Surely they wouldn't consider a male heir, right? Determined to be thorough, Kagami resolved to monitor all Hyuga children of appropriate age, regardless of gender. Of course, it was also possible that his presence alone had deterred the Otsutsuki from acting. Stretching, Kagami decided it was time to move after years of stillness. In his mental domain, Sukuna sneered as he devoured Saimai's soul, spitting in disgust. Can't you find something decent? These otherworldly spirits taste like mops. Perched atop the six-path stone tablet, Kagami replied calmly, Be glad you have anything to eat. I'll bring you a bigger feast soon. Sukuna chuckled darkly. Finally restless, are you? Realized you can't break my seal. For your information, my seal combines jujitsu and chakra. Its strength grows as my cursed energy does. You mean this? Kagami pointed to his right eye, smiling. You're quite foolish. I've known that all along. If I simply stop feeding you for a while and focus on increasing my spiritual energy, wouldn't that upset the balance and break the seal? Sukuna was momentarily speechless. Kagami's smile felt mocking. I haven't bothered because it's unnecessary. Don't overestimate your seal's strength. Besides, if I ever get desperate, I'll just say. Kagami mimicked a dramatic tone. I'm breaking the seal on my right eye now. Wouldn't that be entertaining? This isn't fair, Kagami. Sukuna growled. You gained your power from me, yet I can't grow independently. Isn't this a hollow victory? You should eliminate those petty fragments stealing my cursed energy. Make me the sole absorber of malice. Then we can have a proper duel. Kagami paused, then nodded. If my precious pet insists, I'll oblige. I'll set out in a few days. What did you just call me, you little brat? Sukuna bellowed, his fury shaking the mental space. Kagami stood before the sealed gate, smiling as he watched Sukuna fume. This is better. For a moment, I thought you'd changed. Stay arrogant, I prefer you this way. These days, everyone treated Kagami with utmost respect. The occasional outburst was almost nostalgic. The newly reconstructed Konoha was much larger than the original, thanks to the substantial allocation of resources and manpower. While retaining some of the old Konoha's features, the new layout was more spacious and orderly. The ninja cats of Cats Village had claimed a portion of land for themselves, constructing their own district. The cost of the land was offset against their labor, ensuring no exploitation of their feline allies. In contrast, the UCHIHA district, with its traditional courtyard-style architecture, now felt somewhat like an enclosed village within a city. Yet, in terms of comfort, the courtyard homes were far superior to apartment-style living. As UCHIHA Kagami greeted various clanspeople on his way out of the district, he noticed two small figures by the lakeside. Itachi-kun, why don't you attend the ninja academy? A cute girl with long black hair and a beauty mark below her right eye leaned in, questioning a boy who was quietly eating a three-color dango. Sensing something, Uchiha Itachi turned abruptly and saw Kagami. Immediately, he bent into a 90-degree bow. Greetings, clan leader. The girl, Uchiha Izumi, also turned and noticed Kagami. She patted Itachi's shoulder and laughed. It's just Kagami nii. Why are you so nervous, Itachi-kun? Izumi's mother ran a breakfast shop where Kagami often dined. Having known him since she was a toddler, Izumi didn't see Kagami as a powerful clan leader. To her, he was still the same kind and approachable figure. Thwop. Kagami placed a hand on Izumi's head, spinning her hair into a tangled mess. What do you mean, just? I'm very impressive, you know. Ah. I spent so long fixing my hair. You big idiot. Izumi struggled to free herself, kicking at Kagami's shins. Letting go, Kagami smiled. If you don't hurry, you'll be late for school. Want me to tell your mom? Izumi glared at him, hastily smoothing her hair. Waving at Itachi, she called, I'm off to school, Itachi-kun. See you later. She stuck out her tongue at Kagami before darting away. Meanwhile, Itachi remained in his bowing position, too nervous to rise. Kagami's voice was calm. Izumi isn't afraid of me. What are you afraid of, Itachi? Because we are sinners. Itachi's voice trembled as he spoke, his head hanging low. Ever since he could remember, he hadn't been allowed to leave the Uchiha district. Watching Izumi and other children his age go to school, he often wondered what it would feel like. He couldn't understand why the other clanspeople seemed so happy and fulfilled, while his family felt so different, like caged birds. Even worse, he feared his younger brother, Sasuke, would endure the same fate. Lost in his thoughts, the Sharingan awakened in Itachi's tearful eyes. Noticing this, Kagami's smile deepened. Did Fugaku tell you that? Itachi said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Kagami sat by the lakeside, gazing at the shimmering water. You know, Itachi, I truly love the Uchiha clan. A monster resides within me. One day, I found myself in this unfamiliar world. I was scared of an uncertain future, scared of a predetermined destiny. I had no family before, and none when I first arrived here. But my grandmother took me in, and the clan treated me kindly. No one wanted to harm me. Because of that, I found the courage to face the monster inside me. To fight it, I had to embrace its power and change my destiny. Your father told you that your family are sinners, but he didn't explain your supposed crime, did he? I know him well. That's just the kind of person he is. I'll tell you plainly. If not for me, the Uchiha clan would have been destroyed by you and your father. Itachi's pupils shrank, his small body trembling violently. Kagami's voice remained calm, but to Itachi, it sounded like thunder. That's why. I'll never forgive you. Never. I won't excuse your actions just because they haven't happened yet. I've hated you for 10 years. Only when you and your father live out your lives in regret will my anger be satisfied. Tears fell, drip, drip. Itachi collapsed to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Thank you for making me understand, Kagami-sama. I'll atone alongside my father. But please, I beg you, don't let Sasuke live like this. Please. Kagami stood, his expression softening slightly. I will take Sasuke as my apprentice. He will live a normal life, as will your mother, Mikoto. Thank you. Thank you so much. Itachi's tears now carried a different meaning. From despair to hope. I don't need freedom as long as Sasuke can have it. At the Hokage Tower, a large crowd had gathered outside the office, villagers and foreigners alike. It resembled a doctor's waiting room, with everyone vying for attention. Kagami bypassed the crowd and kicked open the office door. The guards pretended not to notice, closing the door behind him. A small country noble, frustrated by the wait, stood up in protest. Before he could finish, a blade rested coldly against his throat. Turning cautiously, he was met with a pair of crimson Sharingan. You'd better shut up. Kagami-sama might ignore your rudeness, but I will kill you without hesitation. Seeing the Uchiha emblem, the noble nearly wet himself. Or rather, he already had. The Uchiha who held the blade grimaced in disgust, pulling the weapon back slightly. Someone dragged this guy out. He reeks. Inside the office, Minato Namikaze looked more exhausted than usual. The responsibilities of governing countless districts within the Land of Fire weighed heavily on him. But seeing Kagami, he set down his paperwork and smiled warmly. "You're here." Kagami sprawled on a sofa, glancing at the group standing before Minato's desk. Grass ninja forehead protectors. Among them was a red-haired woman with a slightly swollen belly. "They're from UCHIHA," Minato explained. "Apparently, there's a powerful monster causing havoc in the Land of Grass. They're asking us to help eliminate it. But the village is stretched too thin. We simply can't spare the manpower." But Hokage-sama, before the leader could finish, Kagami interrupted. "You, red-haired woman. What's your name?" Startled, she hesitated before responding. I'm Chi-Sui." The UCHIHA leader's eyes lit up. Bowing respectfully, he said, "This woman isn't just beautiful, she has a unique ability. A single bite can heal any wound. If Konoha helps us, we'll offer her as tribute." Minato's expression darkened, his brow furrowing. He hadn't paid much attention to the group earlier, but now, his gaze focused sharply on the woman. Her hair was darker than Kushina's, but her aura, unmistakable. Shing. An invisible force sliced her sleeve, revealing arms covered in bite marks. "So, Chi-Sui, who's your husband? Is he dead?" Chi-Sui shook her head, trembling. I don't know." "Don't know, huh?" Kagami's lips curled into a smile. "Minato, mind if I make a mess in your office?" "Not at all. I'll have it cleaned up afterward." Minato's eyes turned icy, his murderous intent palpable. Minato placed a reassuring hand in front of Chizui's face. A sound like chains breaking echoed. "It's all right now. Don't be afraid. This is your home from now on." The corpse fragments were cleared away, and Karen's mother was taken elsewhere. It was easy to imagine the hell she must have endured in UCHIHA. And yet, even under such torment, she hadn't chosen to flee to Konoha. Minato Namikaze sighed heavily. "The shinobi system. It won't change unless we do something. Tragedies like this will continue." Leaning casually on the sofa, Uchiha Kagami replied, "You can figure out the system. It's not my concern. Get me a complete map of the ninja world. I'm heading out." "You're going to hunt those abominations, aren't you?" Minato knew about what Kakashi Hatake had been doing. After all, Kagami rarely hid his plans from anyone, though he never felt the need to explain them in detail. Something like that. When someone brought him a map, Kagami stood up and gave a brief instruction. "I'll carry one of your marked kunai. If anything happens in the Uchiha district, come to me immediately." Minato nodded solemnly. He understood the gravity of the situation. The young man named Obito had already become a serious threat, one even Kakashi had trouble handling. If the Uchiha clan were to face a crisis that pushed Kagami into darkness, it wouldn't just be the Land of Fire, it would be the entire ninja world, left in ruins by an enraged Uchiha Kagami. "Oh, by the way, Kagami," Minato added with a warm smile, "Kushina is pregnant." Kagami raised an eyebrow. "Ah, the ever-needy Azura. The moment his brother reincarnates, he follows right along." Before leaving, Kagami smirked. "When the child is born, let's throw a proper wedding for you and Kushina." Over the past few years, Minato had been so busy that their previous wedding ceremony was little more than a casual meal with close friends, including Kagami. Minato chuckled softly. "Kagami, if you happen to meet Jiraiya-sensei, could you tell him something for me? I've already picked a name for the child, inspired by his novel. Naruto. You're that confident it's a boy?" Minato laughed. "Even if it's a girl, the name will work. I love its strength." The Land of Fire had become much more stable in recent years. Merchants could occasionally be seen traveling along forest paths. The problem remained the lack of population. The further from the central regions, the sparser the settlements became. Kagami was heading west, intending to deal with the monster sealed within the box of ultimate bliss before visiting the Land of Demons to face the entity known as Morio. When he reached the border, a group of figures in black cloaks adorned with red clouds appeared before him. Kagami halted, smiling lightly. All familiar faces. Obito, long time no see. Obito had grown taller and exuded a cold, detached demeanor. "It has been a while." Obito's gaze was complex as he looked at Kagami. I thought the moment you saw me, you'd use your severance technique to kill me. Kagami's eyes scanned the group. Sasori of the Red Sand. A man with Rinnegan, though not the Deva path. Clearly a puppet. A purple-haired woman, likely Conan. Then Obito, Zetsu, and the green-eyed, angry-looking Kakuzu. Kagami couldn't help but chuckle. Because you, of all people, wouldn't dare show up in front of me in person. Puppets, clones. And Kakuzu, you're the only honest one here, showing up with your real body. Kakuzu instinctively took a step back, scanning his teammates. What was going on? No one told him they weren't bringing their real bodies. Crossing his arms, Kagami continued, I'll deal with you later, Kakuzu. Long time no see, Nagato. Or is it okay to call you that? The man with Rinnegan flinched slightly. Your ocular power truly is terrifying, UCHIHA Kagami. I am Nagato, and this is Conan. Technically, you're junior by a generation. We'd like to talk with you. Kagami raised an eyebrow. Go ahead. As someone from the UCHIHA clan, you should understand our plight. People from smaller villages. Otherwise, you wouldn't have overturned Konoha's previous order after gaining power. Nagato stepped forward. Under your rule, the Land of Fire has achieved peace. That's because they've experienced pain and learned to fear it. I lack the overwhelming strength you possess, but I still managed to kill Hanzo and bring rare stability to the Land of Rain amidst this chaotic world. Our path is the correct one, and we can work together. We can bring peace to the entire ninja world, but we lack the necessary power. The four great nations remain obstinate, intent on inciting war. We need to create a weapon capable of killing millions in an instant. When every nation understands that pain, fear will act as a deterrent, and war will cease. Pain will make this world grow. This is the mission of the Sage of Six Paths descendants. My mission. Join Akatsuki, UCHIHA Kagami. Together, we can bring peace to this world. Kagami nodded, his tone indifferent. It's a plausible path, but you'll die, Nagato. And this won't be any different from the era of Hashirama Senju. You might say the weapon can outlast you, but once you're gone, it'll either be dismantled or go out of control. Nagato, preferring debates on peace to combat, felt validated in coming to Kagami. As expected, Obito's depiction of Kagami as a ruthless warmonger was far from accurate. Nagato's voice was steady. I don't seek eternal peace. I only hope to create a generation that can live and die peacefully amidst this chaotic cycle. There will always be someone to inherit my ideals. What's most important is starting the process. Kagami furrowed his brows. Nagato's argument. It made a lot of sense. And his resolve was unwavering. Would he lose this conviction, just as Hanzo had in his old age? After all, chakra often reflected the will of its wielder, and weakened resolve could diminish strength. You have a compelling vision. Nagato's puppet had no facial expressions, but his body language betrayed a glimmer of hope. Kagami's next words froze him in place. But I refuse. Kagami tilted his head, smirking at the group. When did I ever say I cared about peace in the ninja world? All I've ever wanted is to eliminate anyone who disturbs my tranquility. Every last one of them. You don't even have the courage to stand before me, yet you dare preach to me? Boom. A colorless, invisible slash descended like a celestial blade. Crash. The ground shattered like glass. Space itself seemed to distort, radiating ripples. So we're fighting, huh? Good thing I didn't use Yahiko's body for this, Nagato muttered. Shinra Tensei. A colossal repulsive force erupted, tossing aside earth and trees like mere playthings. An invisible force spread outward, obliterating the forest and clearing a massive area. The repulsive force of Shinra Tensei couldn't stop Kagami's slash, disintegrating under its power. Scatter. Amid the enormous plume of smoke and dust, UCHIHA Kagami took a slight step back. A black iron spear pierced through the haze, grazing just past him. Perched on his third Kazekage puppet, Sasori, with unfolded iron wings, spoke coldly. UCHIHA Kagami, I'm sorry, but you're the greatest obstacle to my revenge. He once believed he could eventually kill Tsukumo Hatake, but now Tsukumo had returned to Konoha and held a position rivaling that of the Hokage. Sasori knew that with Kagami's presence, avenging himself was impossible on his own. The three tomo in Kagami's Sharingan spun, his tone laced with mockery. "I've said it before, your choices are your own. It's not my fault you lack the strength to kill Sukumo. Don't act like I'm the one actively preventing you from taking revenge. You really haven't changed, Uchiha Kagami." Magnet release, Iron Sand World Method. Iron sand rapidly took shape in the air, forming a web-like barrier. Sasori's strikes were infused with hatred. The combined power of the strongest Kazekage in history and the most talented puppet master even surpassed their abilities in life. Poisonous mist spread through the iron sand barrier, obscuring vision. A high-frequency slash tore through the poison cloud as Kagami observed the third Kazekage puppet's movements within the barrier. His expression was relaxed, even nonchalant, yet his vigilance remained high. In a world filled with bizarre and unpredictable techniques, one careless misstep could spell disaster. Still, these opponents. With his experience fighting Madara, Kagami had developed a keen sense for distinguishing impure world reincarnation puppets. Konan, Zetsu, and Obito were merely clones or remote-controlled constructs. Sasori had hidden his core, clearly learning advanced concealment techniques. Nagato's Deva Path puppet was crude and barely functional, as if it had been hastily assembled. In terms of power, Kagami mused, debating how to rank their strength. Among the current 5 Kage, who was the weakest, Raza or Yagura? Since Yagura was already the Three-Tails Jinchuriki, Raza seemed the likelier candidate. So Nagato's Deva Path puppet might just barely qualify as Kage level. Suddenly, a powerful force attempted to pull Kagami into the sharp iron sand barrier. He allowed himself to be drawn in without resistance, crashing into the spikes. Crack. Instead of the sound of flesh being pierced, it was the sound of iron snapping. "Your density is a bit lacking," Kagami remarked with a smirk, his tone dripping with derision. His body's resilience. Was this man still human? Sasori remained fearless, meeting Kagami's gaze. His puppet operated without relying on conventional senses, shielded by multiple layers of firewalls. Fire release, flame wave cannon. Wind release, pressure damage. Combination technique, blazing wind surge. A massive wave of fire swept forward, consuming everything in its path. Fueled by hatred, Sasori's full-force assault was unlike anything before. Die Uchiha Kagami. Even knowing he was the only genuine participant in this fight, Kakuzu wasn't afraid. At worst, he'd die. Could it really be worse than being broke? Amid the sea of flames, Kagami stood unfazed, surrounded by an eerie crimson aura of fire that clung to his body. With a swift movement, he broke through the firestorm, appearing directly in front of Kakuzu. The Sharingan's tomo spun in his eyes as Kakuzu's body tilted forward, his movement sluggish. Kagami grabbed his collar and tossed him aside. "Didn't I say I'd deal with you later?" As a walking treasure trove, Kakuzu had much to offer. Letting him die here would be a waste. Fire release, roaring flame dance. Obito's Kamui twisted space, generating a fiery vortex of immense destructive power. The spiraling flames roared toward Kagami, who narrowed his eyes, analyzing the technique. Kagami compared the destructive effects of Obito's Kamui to his own severance technique. Obito's Kamui operated like folding a sheet of paper to create a crease. He could escape to another sheet through this fold. In contrast, Kagami's severance technique functioned like drawing a line across a picture on the paper, severing the depicted object. Meanwhile, Sukuna's spatial slash was far more terrifying. It split the paper itself, obliterating its contents regardless of their properties. In the world of jujitsu, a direct hit from Sukuna's slash meant certain death, bypassing all forms of resistance. However, in the ninja world, Sukuna's abilities were limited by the vastly different energy dynamics. Obito's Kamui existed somewhere between these extremes. Defeating him required strategies akin to the original timeline's dual-pronged assault. Dodging the roaring flame dance, Kagami weaved through the onslaught of techniques. The Akatsuki members avoided close combat, unleashing large-scale ninjutsu from a distance. Konan ascended into the air, her paper angel wings unfurling behind her. Countless paper blades shot toward Kagami with deadly precision. He formed a quick hand seal, releasing a dragon-shaped flame that engulfed the paper storm. Konan-senpai, interested in a career change? I could make you head of the ninja tools department. Her expression remained cold. Bringing peace to the world was Jiraiya-sensei's dream, as well as Yahiko's and Nagato's. A man like you, who has no such dream, could never earn my loyalty. Impressive resolve. Hold on to it as you move forward, Kagami said, leaping closer to her. The Sharingan's reputation had spread far and wide over the years. Every competent ninja now trained to avoid direct eye contact with its users. But as Konan averted her gaze, what she saw instead was a gleaming, ornate blade. Its polished surface reflected the crimson glow of Kagami's eyes. Konan. Nagato's voice echoed in alarm as Kagami raised his blade high. Desperate, he extended his hand, activating Bansho Tenin, Universal Pull. The pull was feeble, like trying to tug a boulder with a thin thread. Swish. The blade fell. A blood-stained angel plummeted to the ground. As the life force in the body stopped, the remains revealed the sacrificial victim used for the Izanagi technique. Uchiha Kagami raised an eyebrow, slightly surprised. It was White Zetsu. Revealing the existence of White Zetsu outright, did Obito and Nagato's collaboration deepen? It made sense. Even Tobirama had teamed up with Orochimaru for his schemes. Wait, wasn't it true that even in the original timeline, Tobirama worked with Orochimaru? Kagami turned his gaze toward Obito. This guy might have disclosed everything except the Moon's Eye plan. Not wearing his mask and actively participating in battle, Obito didn't seem concerned about revealing information. Could it be? He didn't see Nagato as a pawn, but as a true partner? Ridiculous. After getting soaked in rain, you tore apart someone else's umbrella and still had the audacity to stand together. Hey Nagato-senpai, let me share a little piece of information with you. Seeing Kagami's smile from a distance, Obito felt an ominous premonition. Even with Nagato's puppet body, his anger was palpable. Although Kagami hadn't killed the real Konan, the way he acted so decisively made it clear, if they were truly present, he wouldn't hold back either. What is there to discuss now? Nagato's voice was low and laced with contempt. You reject my ideals, attack us, and now you have more to say? Based on the information I've gathered. Kagami chuckled to himself, though it was a shame Danzo was dead. Otherwise, this could have been pinned on him. It was our dear junior, Obito, who conspired to murder Yahiko-senpai. Such disobedience, Obito. You don't even have the decency to send a letter back to Kakashi, who's been searching for you. The movements of everyone present halted abruptly. What? Was that something you just casually blurted out? Obito took a deep breath, his post-darkening emotional control far better than before. Nagato, he's trying to sow discord. And another thing. Kakashi isn't my master. What nonsense are you spouting, Uchiha Kagami? Calm down, Obito. Zetsu, whether white or black, felt a massive headache. Nagato's gaze was cold and unyielding as he stared at Kagami. Is what you're saying true? Kagami nodded with conviction. If Danzo was dead and Nagato still ended up on his original path, who else could be responsible but Black Zetsu and his group? Even if he hadn't personally investigated, he was confident in this conclusion. With my power, do I need to lie to you? I simply pity you, watching you be played like a fool, so I'm telling you. Nagato's expression grew darker, and a dense killing intent surrounded him like a ferocious beast ready to devour. No. A crisp voice rang out. Power doesn't equate to honesty, Uchiha Kagami. Since when did you start believing you're a man of integrity? From within the Iron Sand World method, Sasori spoke coldly. Nagato, Uchiha Kagami is exceedingly malicious. Even with his overwhelming power, he enjoys unsettling his opponents with words. Not only did I fall for it before, have you forgotten why Kakuzu joined us? Black Zetsu's eyes lit up. Right. He had almost been misled by his own bias. Black Zetsu quickly spoke. Years ago, he deceived Inoki on the battlefield, leading him to believe he was the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. In subsequent battles, his reputation for cunning and underhanded tactics spread, even as the legend of his Crimson Severance grew. According to the intelligence released by the Four Nations Alliance, this man harbors a monstrous entity within him, the likes of which defy comprehension. He manipulated Minato by threatening Kushina, assassinated Orochimaru, drove Jiraiya away. The list is endless. He even forced Madara to relocate multiple times. It's so easy to fabricate accusations. Refuting them? That's an uphill battle. With Black Zetsu's explanation and Obito's enraged yet dignified silence, Nagato's fury subsided. He believed Black Zetsu's words. Most importantly, Obito's demeanor, typically sour, as though the entire world owed him, was now boiling with unrestrained anger. It screamed, "I'm being wronged, but I refuse to stoop to an explanation." Nagato coldly regarded Kagami, snorting. "Enough with your childish tricks, Uchiha Kagami." Kagami stroked his chin, showing no sign of shame. He was merely pondering. "For once, I tell the truth. And you don't believe me?" With a flick of his blade to clean off the blood, Kagami shook his head in mock disappointment. "Don't regret this later, Nagato-senpai. Yahiko-senpai died so tragically, and yet you won't avenge him. Stop speaking his name." Nagato roared, his voice filled with wrath. The Deva Path puppet surged forward, hands outstretched. A powerful repulsion force erupted forth, the black rods embedded in its body trembling under the strain of chakra output. Kagami's gaze turned icy as he gripped his sword tightly. "You're such an idiot. The person you're supposed to protect is right beside you. Did you even ensure her safety?" Nagato hesitated momentarily. In the next instant, a blade flashed, slicing the puppet in two. After that brief effort, Sasori's puppet body shattered, and Zetsu, far from a combatant, swiftly retreated, unwilling to waste even a single white Zetsu clone. In the end, only Kagami and Obito remained. "Mirror, I now possess eyes just like yours," Obito said calmly. "You've long understood the cruelty of this world. You even warned Kakashi and me, just as you did Nagato. We aren't enemies. I've come to understand you. Surely you can." "Sure." Countless blades rained down from above, piercing through Obito's intangible body. The density of the strikes left him unable to finish his sentence. Kagami's expression grew colder. Crossing his arms, he observed Obito amidst the torrent of blades. "I promised Madara I wouldn't kill you as long as you didn't provoke me. But have you forgotten something? I despise you. No, I loathe you. What gives you the right to talk to me about understanding?" Step by step, Kagami approached, his disdainful smirk twisting his lips. "You're still wearing that mask, Obito. You're just a coward running away from reality." Within the storm of blades, Obito ceased using his intangibility, allowing the strikes to shred his body apart. Their goal was simply to gauge Kagami's thoughts, and Obito didn't want to reveal his would release or Kamui's left eye just yet. Neither did he wish for Kagami to deduce the duration of his intangibility. Kagami, finding the entire affair tedious, shook his head and turned away. He walked in the direction where Kakuzu had fled. And thus, the Akatsuki's first attempt to debut ended in utter defeat. "Haha, do you think hiding your money will help?" Uchiha Kagami tossed the limp Kakuzu to the ground and performed a summoning technique. "Ugh, Kagami, my lord." A large orange tabby ninja cat named Zwaluan appeared, its mouth stuffed full of dried fish. The cat hurriedly swallowed its mouthfuls, its eyes darting nervously as it looked Kagami up and down. "You're almost 900 pounds now, aren't you? If you start slowing down, I'll replace you with another ninja cat." Zwaluan shook its head vigorously. "How could that happen, Meow? My fat is my fuel. My speed is the fastest in the clan. They've even started calling me the Orange Flash." Kagami pulled out a piece of paper and pen, drawing a location map. "At this spot, there's a stone statue. 7 trees south of it, 3 meters underground. You'll find the money." The cat saluted with one paw. "Understood." Its large black eyes flicked toward Kakuzu. "You're so brave, Meow. Daring to come out in public again. The land of grass like the land of rain. The land of grass was a small nation sandwiched between great nations. Since the establishment of the one nation one village system, it had been ravaged by wars, especially after Hashirama's death. If there's one thing the grass ninja are praised for, it's their talent for learning, meaning they steal techniques from the major ninja villages due to their lack of their own heritage. Rumors about the grass village's near-world domination with the box of ultimate bliss were likely self-fabricated nonsense. Would the grass village even exist during the time of the Sage of Six Paths? Kagami felt no sympathy for this nation, especially after what happened to Karen and her mother. He understood the reasoning behind Nagato's ideals, sympathized with the struggles of smaller nations. But what does that have to do with me? As Kagami left the Land of Fire, he witnessed the chaos outside firsthand. While not entirely barren, the state of the outside world resembled the apocalyptic wastelands he'd read about. Small ninja villages had turned into refugee shelters, and rogue shinobi had established bandit camps, proclaiming themselves kings of the hills. This was the natural outcome in a world where individuals possessed extraordinary powers but no system of order, primitive survival of the fittest. The Land of Fire was no utopia, but at least it maintained a foundation of governance, where the strong protected the weak, if only to ensure production. During his journey, Kagami eliminated several foolish bandit groups. Seriously, how clueless can you be to pick a fight with me, walking around like I own the place? Even bandits should have some basic judgment. Kagami's target was the escaped monster from the box of Ultimate Bliss, which had taken over Gozu City. The creature was intelligent, commanding a group of puppets modified by the box of Ultimate Bliss to gather chakra-bearing individuals. To clarify, the so-called Satori was nothing more than the strongest puppet controlled by the box of Ultimate Bliss. These strange objects, like the box of Ultimate Bliss, the Morio, and the Ryumayaku, all seem to share the same ability, controlling armies of puppets. Perhaps this was a foundational principle of the shinobi world? The closer Kagami got to Gozu City, the less life he sensed. Human skeletons littered the ground, rotting flesh hung from trees, and the only sound was the cawing of crows. It was like stepping into a demonic kingdom built on human bones. Hey, Sukuna, doesn't this suit your style? Maybe you'd like a castle like this. The king of curses, Sukuna, sneered. Such filth and stench. This place doesn't deserve me. Still, I can sense it. We're getting close to the trash that stole my share of power. Swish. Suddenly, a small figure appeared before Kagami. He glanced up and found her familiar, but couldn't recall her name. She had pale purple ringed eyes that bore a slight resemblance to the Rinnegan but lacked its power. Her white hair and grass ninja forehead protector identified her as a member of the Land of Grass. She was a delicate-looking young girl. Kagami remembered her unique family technique, Dragon Life Rebirth, similar to Chiyo's one's own life reincarnation, sacrificing one's own life to save another. Ah yes, her name was Ryuzetsu. She was the one who, in the original timeline, sacrificed herself to save Naruto's life. The small girl, around 7 or 8 years old, held a kunai tightly and stood resolutely before Kagami. He smiled. Are you trying to rob me? Ryuzetsu shook her head. Don't go any further. There's a terrifying monster in Gozu City. You'll die. There's still time to escape before its puppets come out. Sensing her genuine concern, Kagami crouched slightly to meet her gaze. Then why are you here, little girl? Pain flashed across Ryuzetsu's face. She shook her head fiercely. Don't worry about me. Just leave. Ignoring her warning, Kagami continued toward Gozu City as though strolling through his backyard. Hey, I told you not to go. Ryuzetsu, clearly panicking, ran to block his path again. Follow me. Kagami sidestepped her, his tone calm. This is just a bit of entertainment. As Kagami's figure receded into the distance, Ryuzetsu hesitated before clenching her teeth and following him. She couldn't explain why, but she felt compelled to trail behind him. This person. Sensing Ryuzetsu trailing several hundred meters behind him, Kagami smirked. He liked good people, especially when they were still useful. His tolerance for them increased significantly. He wasn't like Sukuna, a maniac who chopped people down just because he felt like it. Every technique had its limits. He doubted Ryuzetsu's family jutsu could affect him, but if nurtured, it could serve as a failsafe for Shursui, a revival coin. Currently, he was the world's most prominent open threat, essentially the final boss that others strategized against. He wasn't afraid of direct confrontation, but his weaknesses were too obvious. Even his grandmother's grave was heavily sealed to prevent interference from reanimation techniques. The best solution would have been cremation, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. However, for others, he had no such reservations. To prevent Orochimaru's meddling, cremation had been instituted as a new policy in Konoha. Even Tsukumo agreed with it after encountering Tobirama's reanimated form. Blame the villainous S-rank rogue ninja, Orochimaru. As for Shursui, Kagami had made a promise to his grandmother. He'd watch over him. Unlike Uchiha Itachi, Kagami wouldn't dictate a path for Shursui. He would guide him in developing a solid moral foundation, then let him explore the world and make his own choices. While others only got one chance, Shursui would get several. Even if he died due to a wrong choice, Kagami would bring him back to try again. No way would he let Shursui die young and report to his grandmother. As the sun set, the haunting city loomed ahead, growls echoing from within. Figures resembling zombies began to emerge, their numbers seemingly endless. Konoha Village, the original walls surrounding Konoha were gone, replaced by a forest encircling the village. Beyond that forest lay a ring of newly built towns, where the closer the land was to the nation's center, the more expensive it became. The streets closest to the heart of the nation were filled with gambling dens and taverns, a haven for certain types of people. One woman had been living on these streets for years. Konoha knew of her presence, but chose to leave her alone. "Shizen, sake, bring me more sake." Tsunade's face was flushed as she slurred her words, holding a sake cup with unsteady hands. Meanwhile, Shizen stood frozen, clutching Tauntaun tightly, nearly choking the little pig. For figures wearing straw hats stood before Tsunade's table. Through the gaps in the hats, Shizen glimpsed their faces. "Tsunade-sama." One of the figures placed their hat on the table. A tall figure blocked the light from the window. Tsunade squinted up at him, her gaze initially clouded with confusion, as if wondering if she'd drunk too much. Then, surprise gradually took over, her pupils dilating. It was as if she had been struck by a bolt of lightning. Her wide eyes locked onto his face, her drunkenness vanishing in an instant. The man smiled warmly. "Little Tsunade, long time no see." With his long black hair and simple white robe, he looked almost identical to the man in her memories. And his voice. "The first Hokage. Hashirama Senju. Granduncle." Tsunade, though no longer young, couldn't stop her tears from streaming down. She then noticed the other figures. "Second granduncle. Old man Sarutobi. Was this your doing? Orochimaru." In the small tavern, the unthinkable had happened. All past Hokage had gathered in one place. "Little Tsunade, look at you. Is this what a shinobi should be like?" Tobirama Senju's tone was reproachful, but his concern was evident. He even seemed somewhat guilty. "Second granduncle. Still the same as ever. What the hell is going on here?" Edo Tensei, Hiruzen Sarutobi sighed. "I didn't expect things to come to this, but Orochimaru used it to summon the first and second Hokage back from the Pure Land. An invisible barrier activated, ensuring that even the people at nearby tables couldn't overhear their conversation." At Orochimaru's glance, Shizen quickly ran off. "The first and I only recently returned," Orochimaru said, taking a seat and looking at Tsunade with a half-smile. Hiruzen scratched his head awkwardly. "In front of the first and second Hokage, please show some respect and call me by my proper title." Tsunade gave Hiruzen a disgusted look, took a deep breath, and sneered. "As much as I dislike Uchiha Kagami, I despise you even more for disturbing the rest of the dead, Orochimaru." Since losing her younger brother and lover in the Second Shinobi War, Tsunade had grown cynical and developed hemophobia. She spent her days drowning in alcohol and gambling. When the Third Shinobi War began, she outright refused to participate, leaving Konoha with Shizen. If not for her unique status, her actions would have made her a rogue ninja. Watergate and Tsukumo had turned a blind eye to her behavior, as long as she didn't harm the Land of Fire. Orochimaru casually picked up some food from the table and said, "So much has happened in Konoha. I felt it necessary to inform the past Hokage of the situation. And now the picture is quite clear." Tobirama snorted coldly. "The clans that helped found Konoha are nearly extinct. From what I've heard, Uchiha Kagami wiped out the Hyuga family and turned the branch family into subordinates. Kagami's evil surpasses even Madara's. We cannot allow him to run rampant." Hashirama Senju had remained silent, quietly observing Tsunade, as if comparing her to her younger self. "Second Lord Hokage." Hiruzen hesitated. He looked conflicted but eventually sighed and said, "This is all my fault. I failed in my duties as Hokage. I don't know about the Hyuga incident, but many ninja clans dwindled during the wars. Even during the hard times of war, Danzo and I conducted would-release experiments." "Monkey, I already know about that," Tobirama interrupted. "To protect the village, sacrifices from clans are inevitable. It's their duty as Konoha citizens. What's important now is restoring order. Since Orochimaru doesn't want to be Hokage, we can acknowledge Minato's position, but there must be oversight, and revoke Orochimaru's S-rank rogue ninja status. Moreover, The Uchiha cannot be allowed to dominate the Land of Fire. This current peace is temporary. I can see it. The Uchiha will inevitably start the largest war in shinobi history. Hiruzen froze, turning to Orochimaru. You've become a rogue ninja? What does it matter? It's just a label. Orochimaru's tone was indifferent as his gaze shifted to Hashirama. He knew that the man who truly made decisions here was the first Hokage. Hashirama had led his clan during the Warring States period and created the One Nation village system. While his vision might be limited by his era, he was no fool. After hearing Orochimaru explain the current state of the shinobi world, Hashirama hadn't immediately decided to go to war with the Uchiha. If not for Tobirama mentioning that Madara might still be alive, Hashirama might have killed Tobirama and returned to the Pure Land. Even now, in a weakened Edo Tensei body, his power was enough to terrify Orochimaru. To Hashirama, the dead should not meddle too much in the affairs of the living. The future was for the next generation to decide. Little Tsunade. When Hashirama spoke, everyone fell silent, listening intently. He looked at Tsunade with a tender gaze. War still hasn't stopped, has it? I'm sorry you had to endure so much pain. Bang. Ah. Ah. Tsunade couldn't hold back her emotions anymore. She overturned the table and collapsed into Hashirama's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Her feelings had been suppressed for far too long. She had no one to confide in, leaving her to sink deeper into despair. Only in drunkenness could she escape the pain. After a long time, Tsunade wiped her tears away, her eyes red and swollen. Hashirama slowly stood up. Big brother. I'm going to Konoha to see for myself. You mentioned that Madara's face has been carved on the Hokage rock. I'm curious. And I'd like to meet this child who resembles him. Tobirama said gravely, brother, that Uchiha boy is very strong. Without your full power, it's better if we, boom. A terrifying aura filled the barrier, pressing down on Tobirama like a mountain. Tobirama. Hashirama's deep gaze resembled an endless abyss. Even Orochimaru felt paralyzed under its weight, as if confronted by his natural predator. Even in an incomplete state, the power he exuded. This was the god of shinobi. Each word from Hashirama felt as heavy as a mountain. I said I'd go myself. You will all wait here. And do nothing. Hashirama Senju entered Konoha with a passing merchant caravan, his eyes constantly wandering, marveling like a child in a grand new world. Everything was different from the village he once knew. The old, traditional architecture was now rare. Lining the streets were shops, filled with all kinds of goods, only a few of which he could recognize. Apart from arms dealers, most merchants preferred the stability Konoha offered. Although the profits were smaller due to regulated pricing, the goods sold quickly, and merchants didn't need to worry about bandits along the way. Konoha's ninja forces couldn't yet cover the entirety of the Land of Fire, but they ensured the safety of the key trade routes. Though the walls of Konoha were gone, the checkpoints were still manned by guards, teams of Uchiha and Hyuga working together to prevent hostile infiltrations. But Hashirama Senju was no ordinary man. If he wanted to enter, no ordinary Uchiha could detect him, not even those with the Mangekyo Sharingan. As he wandered the streets and alleys for hours, Hashirama began to understand the biggest difference between this new Konoha and the one he had known, a sense of order. Everyone seemed to know what they should and shouldn't do. There was a respect and adherence to the rules. When the Uchiha police force first took over maintaining order, there hadn't been any major issues, but something had felt off to Hashirama. The issue wasn't with the Uchiha, they had followed the rules strictly. The problem was with the villagers. The Uchiha were firm adherents of law over sentiment. But in a village where nearly everyone was connected by family or clan ties, enforcing the law could easily offend a whole network of people. And you couldn't expect someone to feel no resentment when their loved one was punished. Most people prioritized kinship over reason. This fundamental conflict between law and emotion was a debate that had persisted for millennia. Tobirama hadn't been wrong in appointing the Uchiha as the enforcers of justice. They were, by nature, the most suited to the role. Hashirama observed merchant caravans that seemed on the verge of conflict. But a single glance at the patrolling Uchiha nearby immediately quelled any disputes. Hashirama knew that unchecked power could corrupt any group. This was why he and Tobirama had disbanded the Senju clan. If they hadn't, the Senju's reputation and influence would have cemented the position of Hokage as a hereditary role within their clan. But the proud Uchiha would never accept such a scenario. The Uchiha clan was prone to emotional extremes, and Tobirama's solution had been suppression. He couldn't risk the possibility of an emotionally compromised Uchiha holding the highest office. This wasn't prejudice, but a conclusion Tobirama had drawn from countless experiments, all aimed at protecting the greater good. Tobirama didn't hate the Uchiha but simply refused to gamble on the stability of the village, or the future of the ninja world, on their ability to control their emotions. Walking down the road toward the Hokage building, Hashirama glanced up at the Hokage rock, noticing two new faces carved alongside his own. A faint smile graced his lips. Madara. If you had become the second Hokage, perhaps the village would have turned out this way. No, probably not. Although I don't want to admit it, you really weren't suited for leadership back then. If only Izuna had survived. Arriving at the Hokage building, Hashirama knew it would be more difficult to enter unnoticed. The barriers here were more like spiderwebs, easy for him to break, but difficult to bypass without leaving a trace. After a brief moment of thought, he altered one of his jutsu techniques. Inside the Hokage's office, Minato had just finished resolving a dispute with a local official. It was already lunchtime, and he was about to open the lunchbox Kushina had lovingly prepared for him. Before he could take a bite, he sensed a faint chakra fluctuation. Gripping his special kunai, he turned toward a corner of the room where a potted plant stood. From the plant's leaves, a hand extended. Before Minato could throw his kunai, a deep voice emerged from the greenery. Ahaha, sorry for the intrusion. I thought this was the best way to meet you. A figure, glowing green, materialized from the plant. Removing his hat, Hashirama Senju smiled warmly. Konoha's Hokage, I am Hashirama Senju. There are some things I'd like to ask you, if that's all right. At the gates of Demon Lantern City, under the shadow of the city walls, the zombie-like hordes were engulfed in crimson flames, burning like fiery lotuses of karmic retribution. From a distance, the eerie scene almost resembled a city lit by thousands of lanterns. Ryuzetsu stood frozen in shock, unable to believe what she was witnessing. There had been no grand display of energy, not even the simplest hand signs. Yet in an instant, tens of thousands of undead were reduced to ash. With his hands in his pockets, Uchiha Kagami carefully avoided the filth on the ground as he walked toward the city. Ryuzetsu's legs moved of their own accord, compelling her to follow. Suddenly, a deafening roar stopped her in her tracks. A massive beast, wings spread wide, perched atop the city walls. Its four limbs were thick and muscular, exuding power. A grotesque head bore enormous wings, and its gaping maw was lined with twin rows of giant fangs. The entire creature radiated an aura of pure malice. It was the monstrous offspring of the box of ultimate bliss, born alongside Satori. Mokuro. Ryuzetsu's voice trembled as she recognized the beast. Her childhood friend, Mokuro, had been consumed by the red light emanating from the box and transformed into this abomination. Her reason for staying here was to find a way to save him. Countless nights, she'd been haunted by the sound of Mokuro's screams from within the box. Your chakra. It's immense, the beast growled, its massive jaws spreading wide. SHHK SHHK SHHK. With a shake of its massive wings, countless blade-like feathers rained down. Look out! Ryuzetsu cried. But before the feathers could reach Kagami, they dissolved like ice in boiling water. ZZZZT, a crackling black and crimson slash split the air. The inky strike cleaved through the beast, tearing it in two. Residual energy rippled outward, shredding its body to pieces. Why? Mokuro's voice was filled with disbelief as its body disintegrated. I could sense fear. Killing intent. No one could attack me, the slender figure standing above its remains answered. Why would I feel killing intent toward food? From his elevated position, Kagami looked toward the black box at the heart of the ancient city. The box of ultimate bliss. The box of ultimate bliss. A final weapon from the era of the Sage of Six Paths. Each of its four faces displayed an expression of joy, anger, sorrow, or bliss, with thin tendrils of red mist seeping out. That's it, Sukuna said, lounging atop a pile of bones while observing the box through Uchiha Kagami's vision. This thing has taken a large share of the energy. Before Kagami had seized control of the dragon vein, if the negative energy of the ninja world were quantified as a single unit, Sukuna, with his cursed spirit nature, could absorb 3/10 of it. That amount was already immense, allowing him to evolve continuously and accumulate vast reserves of cursed energy. However, since the seals of other monsters began breaking, Sukuna could barely siphon any of that energy. Unlike him, these creatures were unsealed, and this inequality deeply agitated him. "It's unfair," Sukuna often said. When everyone was sealed, Sukuna had relied on his might to claim 3/10 of the available energy. But now that the others were free, they could gorge themselves on almost the entire share, while Sukuna barely scraped the leftovers. The King of Curses found this intolerable. Sukuna had briefly controlled Kagami's body and sensed the world outside. He was confident that without his seal, he could dominate at least half of the available energy, and with the removal of other obstacles, he could claim it all. But Kagami refused to die. Despite his inner monologue, Sukuna didn't voice his frustration. He'd learned firsthand just how venomous Kagami's tongue could be, and how futile it was to argue with him. Kagami's Sharingan spun into his Mangekyo Sharingan. A black and red slash cut through the air, crashing against the box of ultimate bliss. Boom! The surrounding stone floor disintegrated into dust, but the slash failed to damage the box. Unlike the indestructibility of the six-path stone tablet, this box seemed to redirect the slash's energy into an alternate space, perhaps its own dark internal dimension. No matter how many black slashes Kagami unleashed, the result was the same. The box seemed less like a solid object and more like a physical manifestation of malevolent energy. Kagami recalled that, in the original timeline, the box of ultimate bliss was never destroyed. It had been thrown into the sea by the Eight Tails. The fact that it had survived since the time of the Sage of Six Paths was a testament to its unique nature. In the years since Kagami began caring for his grandmother, he hadn't been idle. Using the yin-yang conversion technique, he had gradually balanced his physical and spiritual energy. While there wasn't a direct comparison, Kagami felt his ocular power now rivaled UCHIHA Madara's at the Valley of the End, though his physical strength still fell slightly short of Hashirama Senju's. With reverse healing technique, his body could regenerate as quickly as Hashirama's. Kagami's principle was to develop evenly, leaving no glaring weaknesses. To unlock Sukuna's seal, Kagami had also studied sealing techniques under Kushina and Minato. He hadn't lied to Sukuna. He could remove the seal on his right eye at any time. However, he chose to keep it for reasons akin to Gojo Satoru's philosophy in Jujutsu Kaisen. Kagami's Mangekyo Sharingan followed a unique evolution pathway. He preferred to call it the perfect Mangekyo Sharingan, which possessed 4 high-level abilities. His left eye hosted the destructive Black Slash and the augmentative yin-yang conversion. His right eye contained the secretive Crimson Demon, and another ability reserved for extraordinary situations. For Kagami, Sukuna was merely a caretaker for his right eye. Sukuna, unaware, took pride in the fact that he had sealed the eye. With no immediate opponents capable of challenging him, Kagami wasn't in a hurry. He paused his slashing attempts and performed a series of hand seals. A faint purple chakra enveloped his body. In Kagami's spiritual realm, Sukuna observed the dragon vein's energy seeping through the sealing gate and into the physical world. Was this intentional? Sukuna pondered. From Kagami's chest emerged a translucent dragon-headed chain that shot toward the box of ultimate bliss, wrapping around it layer by layer. The box thrashed violently, emitting guttural howls, but the dragon's maw clamped down tightly, restraining it. Dragon Vein, Great Earthbind. The dragon vein's natural suppression abilities, combined with Kagami's mastery of sealing techniques, granted him an overwhelming advantage against such malevolent entities. The chain compressed the box into a tiny sphere, which the dragon head promptly swallowed, dragging it into Kagami's spiritual space. Behind the crimson sealing gate, Sukuna watched the dragon vein deposit the box atop the mountain of corpses and rivers of blood. Seated on the six-path stone tablet, Kagami sneered. "Looks like you've got company now. Once I capture Morio, you can all start a mahjong game." Sukuna glanced at the box before returning his gaze to Kagami. "Kagami, have you ever wondered," Sukuna began, "that this sealing space might be your most unique ability? Not just me, but the dragon vein, and now this box. How can you hold so much energy?" Sukuna questioned. "People aren't cups designed to contain magma." Kagami smirked. "Why don't you ponder why we're in this timeline at all? Existence is reason enough. Should I question why I have hands? Why I have feet? I'm no philosopher. As long as my power works, that's all I care about." "Kagami," Sukuna said, his gaze darkening. You have the power to expel me, or even kill me. So why don't you? You know you'll never tame me, Sukuna said. I would rather vanish than bow to anyone. Kagami was silent for a moment before smiling at Sukuna. Nothing in this world is absolute. Who knows what the future holds? I can't directly use negative energy, but you can convert it into spiritual energy. Why would I abandon such a clear path to power? To me, whether it's the dragon vein you or the box, you're all the same. Standing, Kagami's form began to fade. Enough talk. Your food is ready, eat up. As his image disappeared, Kagami added, oh, and don't bother with those cheesy, you'll regret this lines. They're overdone and boring. Ryuzetsu carefully sidestepped the crimson flames as she approached the ruined town center, her gaze fixed on the lone figure standing amidst the devastation. Dense black mist writhed like serpents, slowly being absorbed into his body. The box of ultimate bliss was gone. Her pupils widened, trembling violently. The ultimate weapon of Kusugakure, passed down through countless generations. How could it possibly have been destroyed? Or worse, had this man, like Mukade, been devoured by it instead? Logic screamed at her to run, to escape this place as quickly as possible. Regardless of the circumstances, that man was no ordinary human. As the last trace of black mist vanished, Uchiha Kagami took a deep breath, his senses expanding outward. The negative energy contained within the box of ultimate bliss was immense, enough to serve as a wellspring of power for him for a long time. However, the destruction of the box did not mean that Sukuna would automatically inherit its share of energy. It was as though the box had been captured, but its business of evil would not pause. It would be divided and consumed by other malevolent entities. The ninja world was an inexhaustible source of negative energy. Yet, before these monstrous entities broke free of their seals, where had all that energy gone? To the tailed beasts. A portion of it likely flowed into the tailed beasts, or more precisely, human malice had influenced them. Initially, the tailed beasts were pure benevolent guardians of the ninja world. They were not curses or deities of destruction, but beings with the potential for growth and a natural affinity for harmony. Take Kurama, the Nine Tails, for instance. If he chose to, he could wield the entire planet's natural energy. Why would he bother with negative emotions? But even Kurama was eventually tainted by humanity's spiritual pollution. Later in life, he realized this and sought refuge in isolated, uninhabited places. What happened next was history. Madara Uchiha captured him, and Hashirama Senju locked him away. The Nine Tails, originally a symbol of love and peace, became a fox demon embodying hatred. What an injustice! No wonder Kurama loathed Madara so deeply. He had been living peacefully, only to be disturbed by people coveting his power. One day, a red-eyed lunatic came along, calling him a beast. Then he was bound and immobilized for decades. TSK. You didn't need empathy to see how pitiful that was. Kagami could faintly sense streams of negative energy converging to the west. That must be Morio, he surmised. Another so-called world-destroying demon. Hopefully, this one would provide more of a challenge than the box of ultimate bliss. His gaze shifted to the town's gates, where he saw Ryuzetsu standing hesitantly. Though clearly terrified, the girl hadn't run away. She seemed determined to uncover one truth, something she wouldn't rest without knowing. As Kagami approached, she summoned all her courage to speak. Mukade. Do you know where Mukade is? Kagami crouched slightly, smiling. When you ask someone a question, shouldn't you at least explain who this person is or where they might have gone? Ryuzetsu sighed in relief. He seemed human after all. Pointing toward the fragmented remains of the creature he had just destroyed, she continued. Mukade was my friend. A year ago, the box of ultimate bliss caused the uprising in Demon Lantern City. So many people died. The elders said Mukade became that monster, but I know. He told me in a dream. He's inside that box. Kagami nodded thoughtfully, then responded. Anyone devoured by the box of ultimate bliss will have their soul eternally tormented, unable to find peace. In your terms, it means they can never reach the Pure Land. Ryuzetsu's eyes brimmed with tears. No, it can't be. How could this happen? She clutched Kagami's sleeve, her gaze pleading. Please. Mukade is in so much pain. I'm begging you, save him. Save him. Kagami shook his head. He's already dead. There's no saving him. Ryuzetsu's hand fell limp, her tears cascading down like raindrops. Kagami placed a warm hand on her head, his voice soft. His soul has been polluted beyond redemption. The only mercy I can offer him is complete annihilation. What you should do now is live well. If Mokade was truly your friend, that's what he would want for you. He pointed in a direction and placed a shuriken with the Uchiha crest into her trembling hands. Head to the Land of Fire and find the Uchiha clan. Tell them to bring you to a boy named Shisui. He'll take care of you. You've survived in a place like this. You're strong. You can do it, can't you? Ryuzetsu stared blankly at the shuriken, her tearful eyes gazing up at Kagami. Uchiha. Even at her young age, she had heard the name. The Uchihas were the most renowned clan in recent years, the rulers of the Land of Fire. She didn't know how strong they were, but Mokade had once told her that the Land of Fire was the only haven left in this chaotic era. Clutching the shuriken tightly, she asked one last question. Will Mokade truly find peace? Of course. I can promise you that. Kagami stood silently, watching as Ryuzetsu walked away, turning back every few steps. Sukuna's voice rang out. Ha! A mouthful of lies, as usual. Sukuna recalled what he had done to Itadori. No matter how much the boy begged, he had refused to save his friend. It wouldn't have been difficult to locate Mokade's soul in the box, or to purify it with your yin-yang release. But you told her it was impossible, just to sever. What do you call it? Sukuna sneered. Bonds. Bonds isn't even a good word. Kagami turned and began walking in the opposite direction of Ryuzetsu. She possesses a rare resurrection technique. Consider it my insurance policy for Shisui. Sukuna chuckled coldly. So, you're planning to use her as a trigger for your little brother's Mangekyo awakening? You're more twisted than I am, Kagami. Kagami shrugged. Don't make me sound like an obsessive, controlling older brother. Can't I just be a kind soul trying to save a pitiful girl? Ha! On the borders of the bird country, Kagami accelerated toward the land of demons, eager to finish his work and return home. The air outside the Land of Fire was almost unbearable. Suddenly, Kagami stopped, his heart skipping a beat. He looked up. At first, it was just a faint dot in the sky. But as the moments passed, it grew rapidly, its shape becoming clearer. A massive meteor, engulfed in roaring flames, hurtled toward the earth like a blazing fireball. Even thousands of miles away, the air roared under its oppressive descent. It was as if a god had unleashed divine wrath upon the land. The meteor sped directly toward Kagami's location. Snap! Kagami clasped his hands together, his chakra surging and kicking up a cloud of dust. His Sharingan blazed with astonishment, curiosity, and above all, excitement. As the meteor neared the ground, the immense wind pressure uprooted massive trees, sent boulders tumbling, and shook the earth violently. Boom! The massive celestial rock crashed into the ground with an earth-shattering roar, sending tremors across the land. Dust clouds erupted into the air as the impact left a colossal crater, molten rock pooling at its center. When the smoke cleared, a towering black and red half-formed humanoid figure stood in the crater. Inside his Susanoo, Uchiha Kagami gazed skyward. In the heavens above, countless smaller meteors rained down like burning arrows, their luminous trails painting the sky. Though they were smaller than the first, their sheer number was overwhelming. They didn't even bother with a greeting, just straight to a kill shot. On the moon. Inside the celestial palace of the Otsutsuki clan, Otsutsuki Tonari stood before an enormous golden eye. The Tensigen, the ultimate eye of the Otsutsuki's Hamura lineage, rivaled the Rinnegan of Hagoromo's line. It represented the pinnacle of Byakugan evolution. The Tensigen was a fusion of the Byakugan from the descendants of Hamura, wielding immense power. Not only could it manipulate meteors, but when pushed to its limits, it could even move the moon itself. Nearby stood a young boy with empty, featureless eyes. "Father, what are you doing?" Otsutsuki Tonari fixed his gaze on the shinobi world below, drawing meteors toward the planet's surface through the Tensigen's might. "The world Hagoromo created has failed," he said coldly. "For 1,000 years, it has known nothing but unending war. And now, it has become a land of demons." His expression darkened. "Worse still, one of Hagoromo's descendants is absorbing malevolent forces. If left unchecked." Tonari turned to the boy, his voice solemn. He will become the being our ancestors recorded, the god of ultimate evil. Tonari knelt and gently touched the boy's cheek. Shinen, there is still one branch of the Byakugan on Earth. With your pure Otsutsuki bloodline, if you combine with their untainted Byakugan, you can awaken your own Tensigan. He stood, his voice firm. I have little time left. The meteors alone cannot kill that monster. I will descend and use a portion of the Tensigan's power to ensure our mutual destruction. Afterward. For the first time, Tonari's expression softened. You must reshape this world as our ancestors intended. You will be the progenitor of the ideal world. Facing the relentless meteor shower, the black and red Susanoo gripped its blade tightly. Slash. A colossal crescent-shaped arc of black and crimson energy tore through the air, obliterating the incoming meteors. Boom. 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 Asterisk explosions echoed across the heavens, their force scattering thick clouds of ash and filling the sky with black lightning. Moments later, the lightning subsided, leaving behind a storm of ash and embers, as though the very world had burned to cinders. Standing atop his Susanoo, Kagami's crimson eyes locked onto a dark void opening in the sky. From the void emerged a lone figure. Clad in ancient robes adorned with patterns of tomo, his alabaster skin gleamed faintly under the dimming light. His long blue-white hair flowed like silk, and his yellow-tinted Byakugan glowed with an otherworldly brilliance. Otsutsuki Tonari had crossed the void between the moon and earth, arriving on its soil. Click, beneath Kagami's curls. His right eye emitted an audible crack. Tonari activated the veins around his Byakugan, his vision revealing Kagami as a dense mass of pure evil. So, Hagoromo's descendants have fallen this far. He wasted no time on words. Raising his hand, Tonari unleashed a brilliant yellow chakra beam. The beam surged forward, ionizing the air in its path and leaving a distorted trail in its wake. Its radiant glow was blinding, as though it could burn away one's very soul. Kagami's lips curved into a smile. His left Mangekyo Sharingan spun, its four-pointed design shimmering. Swish! A black and crimson energy slash cleaved through the air, colliding with the golden beam. Boom! The collision created a blinding explosion, releasing shockwaves that tore through the surroundings like a hurricane. A massive light orb formed from the impact, glowing like a miniature sun rising on Earth. But before the light dissipated, another golden beam pierced through the explosion's perimeter, curving unnaturally as it aimed for Kagami. He had already dismissed his Susanoo. Though it was well suited for large-scale battles or massive enemies, Kagami realized from the earlier clash that his Susanoo couldn't withstand such an attack. This must be the Tensigan's power. From his memories, Kagami knew the Tensigan was on par with the Rinnegan. While it lacked the Rinnegan's versatility, it more than made up for it with raw destructive power. Its most extreme display of strength? Otsutsuki Tonari's golden wheel reincarnation explosion, which had split the moon in half with a single strike. If splitting the moon can free Kagaya Otsutsuki, maybe I should pass that tip to Black Zetsu. Stop wasting time messing with the Uchiha. Bang! A gray-white stone tablet appeared before him. The golden beam, capable of piercing steel walls with ease, scattered harmlessly against its surface like water droplets. Is that? Tonari frowned, sensing an uncanny familiarity. The tablet exuded an aura reminiscent of the ancestral statues of Hamura. Before he could process it, a shadow engulfed him. The stone tablet, now cloaked in an ominous blue-purple chakra, plummeted toward him. Tonari raised his hand, a faint sneer on his lips. A yellow orb of chakra formed in his palm, aimed at the descending slab. Otsutsuki prided themselves on their superiority, wielding powers far beyond mere shinobi techniques. Yet, the moment his chakra orb met the stone, Tonari froze in disbelief. Instead of neutralizing it, the stone shattered his chakra orb upon impact. The pressure compressed the air, creating a deafening boom as the slab struck him. Crash! Tonari was sent hurtling into a nearby mountain, the force obliterating it into a cascade of debris. Kagami clapped his hands, dozens of energy slashes materializing mid-air, converging on the collapsing mountain. The once solid rock crumbled like tofu, disintegrating into a massive wave of dust and rubble. Leaping atop the debris, Kagami wielded twin blades, closing in on the remnants of his opponent. Still alive, huh? His leap was abruptly halted. Without warning. Swish! A black chakra rod pierced through Kagami's heart. A man in a white robe, his skin marked with black patterns, appeared before him. A long braid trailed from the back of his head. Gripping the rod, his voice was icy. "You've been looking for me, haven't you, Uchiha Kagami?" "So have I. For a millennium. For the perfect vessel." Jigen's cold sneer widened, meeting Kagami's gaze. But what greeted him wasn't despair. It was a pair of spinning Mangekyo Sharingan, their sinister power igniting the air. Kagami's bloodied lips curled into a smirk. "Ah, so you found me. Jigen. An ancient figure from long ago. During the era when Otsutsuki Kagaya and Otsutsuki Ishiki arrived on Earth to plant the divine tree, Ishiki was ambushed by Kagaya. Half of his body was devoured by the divine tree. Barely escaping with his life, Ishiki eventually parasitized the body of Jigen, completely taking over his consciousness. The name Jigen was now nothing more than a label for this vessel. Ishiki Otsutsuki controlled everything. Uchiha Kagami observed the black patterns sprawling across Jigen's body. The intricate designs exuded an air of surreal beauty and dread. The Sharingan, its most powerful state achieved when both eyes synchronize, shone brilliantly in Kagami's sockets. His eyes, more potent than even the eternal Mangekyo, carried a mysterious depth. Unlike other Mangekyo Sharingan, Kagami's aura was not one of cold, oppressive darkness. Instead, it was the essence of an endless abyss, unfathomable and infinite. As Kagami stood motionless, an inky blackness began spreading from him like a drop of ink splashing onto the canvas of the sky. Jigen sneered inwardly, meeting the gaze of Kagami's Sharingan without a shred of fear. A descendant of that detestable Kagaya. Such inferior bloodlines were unworthy of his concern. With a casual twist of his wrist, Jigen pushed the chakra rod deeper into Kagami's chest, thoroughly shredding his heart. As long as the brain remained intact, the vessel could still serve his purpose. Although Kagami's body wasn't an ideal match, its perfection, the seamless balance of yin and yang, was akin to a flawless sphere. This compatibility didn't matter anymore. Such an exceptional vessel would undoubtedly allow Ishiki Otsutsuki to achieve complete resurrection. Jigen had arrived near the battlefield during the meteor's descent. After centuries of patience, very few things could stir his interest. But the meteor, originating from the moon, caught his attention. He knew who was sealed on the moon: Kagaya Otsutsuki, the wretched woman who had caused his downfall. His wounds had yet to fully heal, and he wasn't in any condition to move freely. If Kagaya were to break free now, her power after consuming the divine tree's fruit far exceeded Ishiki's peak. If she escaped and unleashed another infinite Tsukuyomi, there would be no escape. Initially, Jigen only wanted to investigate the meteor's summoner. Instead, he stumbled upon an unexpected treasure. Uchiha Kagami. The name was not unfamiliar to him. The strongest Uchiha of this era, likely on par with Uchiha Madara decades ago. He had once observed Madara from a distance. The Uchiha were not suitable as vessels for resurrection. Neither were the Senju nor the Uzumaki. Each lineage had its strengths and weaknesses, but none were balanced. Even as vessels, they would only last for a limited time. It was better to remain in his current host while searching for a suitable container. But Kagami, this descendant of Kagaya, possessed a body of unparalleled perfection. What's more, Kagami seemed aware of Ishiki's existence, having dispatched people to search for a monk named Jigen. Jigen couldn't understand how, but it didn't matter. Once he occupied this body, he could extract Kagami's memories and learn everything. Vast amounts of chakra flowed through the rod embedded in Kagami, inscribing kama markings across his skin. The kama, an ability unique to the Otsutsuki, compressed all of Ishiki's data into a single seal, embedding it within his vessel. This vessel bore a black diamond-shaped mark known as kama. Simply put, kama was a compressed archive. When fully decompressed, it allowed the Otsutsuki to resurrect completely. The principle was akin to Kagaya resurrecting through Madara or Sukuna's partial revival through his fingers. A standard power among demons and monsters. As the chakra transfer slowed, Jigen smirked. "Give up your futile resistance," he said, his tone measured, as though addressing a conquered subject. "You should feel honored to serve as my vessel. It's the greatest blessing an inferior creature like you could receive. I will preserve your consciousness," he added with mock gentleness. "You'll be the final witness to this star's end. Accept your fate." By the end, His voice was filled with glee, like a man savoring a fine meal. "You're quite noisy." Crack. Jigen's triumphant grin froze as Kagami raised his hand, slashing through the chakra rod with ease. Impossible! Jigen's mind reeled. How could such a lowly creature sever my chakra rod? Even if he had mastered yin-yang release, the qualitative gap between us is insurmountable. Kagami's crimson eyes, glowing with malice, seemed to pierce straight through him. With a calm, almost dismissive swing of his blade, Kagami spoke. "You inferior Otsutsuki cannot comprehend the power of the Sharingan." Thump. Kagami raised his sword, holding it horizontally in one hand. The blade's tip barely touched the air, yet ripples spread outward from the contact. Blackness consumed the surroundings. The sky, the sun, the earth, the forests, all were drained of their color. A low hum resonated through the air. The space around them was engulfed in darkness, as if the world itself had been swallowed by a bottomless abyss. Thick, black-red energy churned like a living thing, emanating an oppressive, suffocating aura. Something was wrong. Jigen's instincts screamed at him to flee. He activated his space-time technique, intending to escape this foreboding space. But nothing happened. His pupils shrank as he realized the horrifying truth. The space-time jutsu had been neutralized. His gaze snapped downward, focusing on the viscous black-red fluid spreading across the ground. The liquid interfered with his ability to manipulate space-time. Looking up, Jigen saw Kagami standing before a massive black coffin, its base built upon a staircase of skeletal remains. Black-red liquid oozed from the edges of the coffin, pulsating with an unnatural rhythm. Kagami plunged his sword into the skull of a skeletal figure, pressing his palms together. A mighty roar echoed as a colossal blue-purple dragon emerged, its body stained black as it coiled above the coffin. Suspended over the coffin, the dragon formed into an ominous black moon. Kagami's lips curled into a sadistic smile as he murmured, "This was specially prepared for pathetic cowards like you who rely on space-time techniques to escape." He raised his hands. Domain expansion. Tsukuyami no Mikoto, prison of the underworld's calamitous killing tomb. Boom. Countless skeletal heads began to twist and contort, transforming into spiraling black towers. Kagami's expression was one of ecstasy, not merely drunk on power but reveling in the sublime sensation of unity with the world. Blood-red tears seeped from his Mangekyo Sharingan, their malevolent aura flooding the darkened space. Jigen scowled, forming another chakra rod in his hand. "Insolent worm. You'll regret this arrogance. This will be your grave." Clang. Kagami drew his blade, now encased in black chakra threaded with crimson veins, and met Jigen's rod with a resounding clash. From atop his skeletal throne, Kagami sneered down at his opponent, his tone dripping with disdain. "Inferior creatures like you should show respect when addressing the noble Uchiha." Boom. In the lightless domain, black rods and crimson blades clashed, their sparks illuminating the endless darkness. The left Mangekyo Sharingan wielded Kai Black Slash and Yin-Yang Conversion, while the right bore Scarlet Demon and Tsukuyami no Mikoto. Tsukuyami no Mikoto, another name for Tsukuyami, is a deity ruling over the night. Uchiha Itachi's Tsukuyami dragged opponents into an illusory realm where he controlled time, space, and all factors. Uchiha Kagami's Tsukuyami no Mikoto, however, projected his spiritual domain into reality, freezing time and space within a set area. A quintessential high-level technique, it held little value against opponents without space-time abilities. Tsukuyami no Mikoto, prison of the underworld's calamitous killing tomb, was not a standalone ocular technique. It was a framework built on Tsukuyami no Mikoto. Powered by Scarlet Demon's complete control of the Dragon Vein, it integrated Ten Shadows Law, Black Path Technique, Sealing Techniques, and the Domain Expansion method inspired by Sukuna. The key component was Kagami's unparalleled ocular power, seamlessly fusing it all together. This technique had been reserved for taming Sukuna once he matured, using the domain to subjugate him entirely. Kagami never doubted Sukuna's cunning. He was sure that Sukuna would eventually analyze and devise a countermeasure for this technique. But it didn't matter. Kagami had always found Sukuna's development slow. He needed the King of Curses to evolve continuously to meet his expectations. He would never choose the safest path. As he once told Sukuna, Kagami did not fear risk or challenge. He was always ready to die. The path to true strength had no shortcuts, only repeated breakthroughs of the shackles of life and death. Boom. The chakra rod clashed against the black blade, and they immediately separated. Jigen's expression remained indifferent as he spun his weapon, swinging it with force to create a powerful gust aimed at Kagami's face. Kagami lightly sidestepped, dodging the strike with ease. His blade shifted, stabbing toward Jigen's ribs, specifically the kidney. Clang! Jigen's reflexes were razor-sharp. He swiftly retracted his rod to block the strike. The blade and chakra rod collided with a crisp metallic ring. Ordinary chakra rods weren't particularly durable, as Kagami had demonstrated earlier when he cut through one. Aware of this, Jigen reinforced the hardness of his rod. Having once been ambushed by Kaguya, Jigen had become exceedingly cautious. Even against Kagami, whom he deemed an inferior creature, he had chosen to initiate the encounter with a sneak attack. Now, while battling, Jigen's mind worked tirelessly to analyze and dismantle this bizarre domain. To him, Kagami was surprisingly formidable, but only to a degree. What truly unsettled him was the inability to use space-time techniques to escape. If Kaguya, or one of her descendants like the Sage of Six Paths, had left behind a contingency plan, it could spell trouble. His eyes darted back and forth, observing the shadowy space around him. What kind of monstrosity is this? Yin-yang release, natural energy, sealing techniques, and an ominous, malevolent aura. His mind replayed the moment Kagami had used the Six-Path Stone Tablet to swat away Otsutsuki Tonari. This man seemed to understand that traditional jutsu were ineffective against the Otsutsuki, and Kagami had been searching for him, Jigen, even before this encounter. Not even Kaguya should have known of his existence. Could it have been the Sage of Six Paths? That might explain things. After all, he was Kaguya's offspring and the world's safeguard against her folly. Uchiha Kagami. You seem to know quite a lot about us. Jigen's tone was calm as he deftly parried Kagami's unrelenting assault. Despite the ferocity of Kagami's taijutsu and the swiftness of his strikes, Jigen held the advantage. Taijutsu was one of his fortes. The black blade danced in a flurry of relentless attacks. Kagami smirked lightly. Studying apes is a standard subject for humans. Jigen shook his head dismissively. If you think verbal jabs will unsettle me, you're mistaken. It only makes you seem desperate. Unsettle you? Kagami's smile faded, his voice suddenly serious. I genuinely think your kind is inferior. Born with unnaturally long lifespans, immense innate power, and the ability to reincarnate through data transfer. Yet all your race does is shepherd tentails, feeding Otsutsuki to cultivate divine trees. Kagami chuckled coldly. You remind me of an old joke. Two peasants fantasize about the luxuries of an emperor's life. They concluded that the emperor must use a golden hoe to farm. Ha 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 ha. You're no different from fools using golden hoes. Black-red lightning crackled across Kagami's blade as he swung it down fiercely. Thousands of years of stagnation, content with mere harvesting. From birth to death, never achieving a true evolution of power. Relying on your innate strength while being utterly terrified of death. Always scheming for reincarnation. Kagami's Sharingan burned with contempt. Jigen froze momentarily, shaken by the unrelenting scorn in Kagami's gaze. Never had anyone dared look at an Otsutsuki with such disdain. Pioneers like the Sage of Six Paths, who established the Pure Land. Peacebringers like Hashirama Senju, the ambition of Uchiha Madara. Even Tobirama Senju, who despised death yet pursued immortality to master all ninjutsu. And then there's Orochimaru. Even Sukuna. Kagami's Sharingan glowed ominously, his mouth curling into a chilling grin. And most importantly this world is filled with beings far stronger than your pathetic race. Black-red arcs of energy flashed relentlessly in the dark domain. Finally, Kagami's blade nicked Jigen's cheek, drawing a thin line of blood. Within the domain, all of Kagami's abilities, including his ocular powers, were fueled by the dragon vein. Using yin-yang conversion as a converter, the natural energy attributes rendered Jigen incapable of absorbing the attacks with his Kama. Not only that, ever since the domain was established, its oppressive energy had subtly eroded Jigen's mental state. Though minor, it was like water wearing away stone. Combined with Kagami's cutting remarks and relentless strikes, Jigen's stoic expression finally cracked. Enough. For the first time, anger flickered in Jigen's otherwise impassive eyes. Silence, you inferior creature. Swish. 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 Jigen thrust his palm forward, releasing dozens of black rods with the speed of lightning. Boom. The rods struck Kagami, only for his form to dissolve into white smoke. Kagami reappeared at Jigen's flank, slashing diagonally with his blade. Otsutsuki techniques may be formidable, but can't you even counter something as basic as shadow clones? You have no right to call the life of this world inferior. It's over. Jigen abandoned his rebuttal, focusing entirely on Ishiki's ocular powers, SUKUNA. This ability allowed him to instantaneously shrink and enlarge objects, including himself and others. Kagami's swing missed as Jigen shrank to the size of an insect. But Kagami showed no surprise. He released his blade, forming a hand seal instead. Black coffin seal. Boom. Under the black moon, the massive coffin flung open, spewing torrents of inky darkness that engulfed the space around Jigen. In an instant, the black energy coalesced into a perfectly smooth sphere, sealing Jigen inside. Crack, as the sound of the seal's closure echoed, boom. The black sphere, seemingly formed of thick, tar-like liquid, shattered violently. Sticky, viscous fluid dripped from Jigen's body. Uchiha Kagami. You were right. The Otsutsuki clan does indeed need to seek higher evolution. Invisible shockwaves radiated outward, dispersing the lingering black fluid. More intricate black markings spread across Jigen's body, and a single curved horn sprouted from his head. The overwhelming chakra emanating from him made the entire domain tremble. Stage 2. In the original timeline, Jigen, in this state, destroyed Sasuke's perfect Susanoo and Naruto's Ninetales mode with a single strike. Although his injuries hadn't fully healed yet, Kagami could clearly sense this power surpassed his own. Of course, Kagami had never expected it to be easy to seal Jigen. After all, fighting a boss often meant dealing with a second form. Destroying Jigen's body would only trigger the automatic revival of the true Otsutsuki Ishiki. Kagami had even considered luring Ishiki into marking him with a Kama and dragging him into the Gate of Seals. But it wouldn't work. It was like trying to catch a powerful wild Pokemon by throwing a Pokeball without weakening it first. It was bound to fail. There's an old question that aptly describes the situation. How do you fit an elephant into a refrigerator? The answer? You cut the elephant into pieces first. Swoosh. Kagami extended both arms, unleashing countless black-red slashes into the air. You're quite impressive, but this ends now. Boom. Jigen reached out, crushing one of the slashes with his bare hands. Swish. 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 Dozens of black rods erupted from Jigen's body, shooting out like a tidal wave. Skulls and bones shattered under the onslaught, and black liquid sprayed everywhere. Kagami's body swayed deftly, his physical prowess allowing him to keep up with his Sharingan's extreme perception. Amid the rain of rods, Kagami didn't retreat, he advanced. Whoosh. Jigen turned into a blur, moving so fast that even Kagami's Mangekyo Sharingan couldn't track him. It was as if he were teleporting like the flying Raijin technique. Kagami knew better. It was Jigen's ocular ability, SUKUNA, shrinking his body to near invisibility and enlarging it when attacking. A simple concept, but terrifyingly practical in combat. The instant Jigen shrank, Kagami couldn't see him at all. While Kagami mocked the Otsutsuki, he didn't let his guard down for even a moment. A heavy blow struck Kagami square in the chest, forcing him to bend forward reflexively. Where's that arrogance you had earlier? Jigen sneered. Kagami didn't respond. He had already achieved his goal, unsettling Jigen's composure. Now, silence would serve to aggravate him further. As a master manipulator of emotions, Kagami knew that sometimes, words weren't necessary. Striking Kagami felt off. Jigen frowned. Despite his overwhelming power, his punches didn't seem to be causing significant damage. Then he noticed something strange. The injuries he inflicted earlier, the wounds from his chakra rods, were gone. Rapid regeneration? Jigen's gaze darkened as he scrutinized Kagami's body. This vessel. It even has accelerated healing. Kagami leaned back to dodge another attack, his fingers brushing against Jigen's wrist. Slash. A razor-sharp slash erupted at point-blank range, cutting 2 inches into Jigen's wrist. Jigen froze momentarily, studying the wound. This slash, it amplifies its cutting power upon contact. What an insidious technique. For the first time, he felt a sliver of respect for the Uchiha clan. Meanwhile, in Kagami's mental space, Sukuna observed the battle with growing interest. The precision of Kagami and Jigen's timing, their seamless control of power, each clash was a masterclass in combat. Sukuna couldn't help but recall Kagami's words from long ago. There are plenty of people in the shinobi world who could kill you, Sukuna. How infuriating. And yet, Sukuna's lips curled into a feral grin. What would these Otsutsuki taste like? Jigen's strikes became faster and more relentless. To Kagami's eyes, it seemed as though Jigen's movements skipped frames, with no transition between actions. One moment, his fist was raised. The next, it was already upon him. This is your so-called domain. Jigen sneered as he cornered Kagami with his ferocious attacks. You think you've trapped me, but you've only sealed your own fate. Or perhaps, without space-time abilities, you were doomed from the start. Kagami didn't bother responding. After all, even basic summoning jutsu was a form of space-time ninjutsu. Ignoring Jigen's taunts only enraged him further, causing him to expend more chakra in his increasingly aggressive onslaught. Beaten and battered, Kagami looked worse for wear. Where's that smug attitude now, boy? Jigen roared as he prepared another devastating blow. But just as his fist descended, swoosh, Kagami vanished, reappearing atop a black skull tower. Adjusting a dislocated bone, he casually retrieved a spare cloak from a scroll and draped it over his shoulders. His swollen face quickly healed, and Kagami shot Jigen a lopsided grin. Jigen's teeth clenched. He had felt it, a faint ripple of space-time chakra. What the hell is going on? This domain was supposed to affect both sides equally. Jigen activated Sukuna Hikona again, closing the distance in an instant. Yet, the moment he reached the skull tower, Kagami had already moved to another one. Jigen quickly assessed the battlefield. There were 88 black towers. No matter. All he needed to do was target them all simultaneously. But just as he finalized his strategy, the towers began to shift positions unpredictably. Tsukuyami no Mikoto, prison of the underworld's calamitous killing tomb. Its defining characteristic, suppression. The technique was never intended to kill, it was designed to tame Sukuna. By provoking Jigen into repeatedly using his ocular powers, Kagami sought to exhaust him, forcing either his chakra or his lifespan to run out. Kagami wasn't foolish enough to engage Jigen in a direct contest of strength. He had already pushed his limits by enduring Jigen's attacks to hone his taijutsu. Risking death didn't mean seeking it. Realizing Kagami's strategy, Jigen changed tactics. Instead of chasing Kagami, he focused his attention on the black moon above. The moon, pulsating ominously, seemed to be the source of this domain. If I destroy that... The black moon quivered as if something within it was about to break free. Boom! A massive figure blocked Jigen's path. A fearsome armored demon with black-red plating towered before him. Meguro armored Susanoo. From his perch atop one of the black towers, Kagami crossed his arms, watching the scene unfold. The moon, which powered the domain, was entirely sustained by the dragon vein. Naturally, it required a protector. Meanwhile, in the outside world, on the shattered earth, a pure black sphere sat ominously. While Jigen remained unaware, Kagami had a view of both inside and outside the domain. Emerging from the rubble, Otsutsuki Tonari unleashed relentless attacks on the black sphere. To him, Kagami was a demon undergoing some unholy evolution, and it had to be stopped. But no matter what he tried, summoning meteors or unleashing powerful chakra attacks, the sphere remained impervious. Half of Kagami's shadow clone emerged from the sphere, monitoring the external situation. He had kept his true body inside, prepared for contingencies. Now, one had arrived. A figure approached, moving with blinding speed, seemingly unfazed by the surrounding devastation. There were few in the current shinobi world capable of such a feat. As the figure grew closer, Kagami's brows furrowed. Tonari alone wasn't enough to threaten the domain. But this man... The shadow clone formed a seal, ready to alert Kagami's true body. A boisterous voice rang out. Uchiha Kagami. So it's you causing all this ruckus. I have some things to discuss with you, about Madara. Ha ha ha. But first, let me help you deal with this guy. Boom. The broken and desolate earth suddenly trembled as a colossal wooden dragon burst forth from the ground.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.